Chew the Fat will give you our gut reactions on all things pop culture, film, TV and theatre. We talk the legends in the creative industry and those on the rise. We game old school. We do all of this, and a whole lot more. Like, subscribe, and get involved. Join Lance Dean, Anthony Nielsen, and the Outcast Creative.
And here I am. Welcome back to another special episode of, it's technically an episode of Chew the Fat, but we use the main intro title there. I'm just waiting for YouTube to flag me once again for the music that's not actually copyrighted, but they keep trying. So we're going to be talking about episode 5 of Masters of the Air tonight in some detail. I've got a great panel of guests with me. I'm going to bring everybody in. One might be arriving slightly late. And I may be adding a couple of people as we go along. So first, representing the American B-17 one-to-one scale, it's BluCollarLoser.
As I'm drinking Scottish whiskey, so go figure.
Okay, mate. I only want to see like about a third of that bottle gone by the end of this stream.
Come on, I mean, you only get drinker for an hour, so I'll try to polish it off by the time he leaves.
Well, I've got 2 drinkers on my stream is enough. Talking of that, here's the second one.
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, I'm glad to see you've returned from your wet trip to London. Did you enjoy our fantastic weather?
It was great. Actually, to be fair, it wasn't as bad as they predicted. Generally, the weather held up for me, so I was all right. I was happy enough with that.
It was just the first day. Did you get to go into FOP and Forbidden Planet and all that?
I went to a couple of like geeky places, emporiums of all things geek related, but I didn't make it to Forbidden Planet this time. I was kind of rushing here, there, and everywhere because I had a lot of things I had to get to while I was down there.
Probably best for your credit card and wallet that you didn't pass that doorway. Last but by no means least, and if I had a big drum roll effect, I would play it. And if I had copyright for Tina Turner's Simply the Best, I'd play it also. It's HistoryBro.
Hi, how are you doing?
With an eyebrow severely raised, very appropriately.
I really want that chair that you're in, HistoryBro. It looks so good.
It looks like Dr. Evil. Can you like hold a cat next week?
Oh my God.
Yeah, thank you. There's something off with the lighting where I look particularly egg-headed today. Literally an egghead. No, thanks for having me. As always, a pleasure to talk about World War II stuff.
We'll try to only spend 15 minutes comparing you to Dr. Evil at most. We should be being joined by the Inside Man, hopefully, and might have Diabolical Souls on later as well. But let's get straight into episode 5. I'm going to just put it up front and out there. I really loved this episode. There was very little in it that I could find fault with. We'll just give a quick synopsis of the story, which I'll try and avoid any spoilers, and then I'll go around to my guests and see what they have to say about it. Basically, it is essentially a mission episode. At the very beginning, people are just coming back from the last one and talking about people that are missing, people that they've lost. And then straight away, we are going back up again. But they're not going with a full complement of 24 aircraft. They're only going with 17. Yeah. Only 13 of them actually make it over the channel because 4 have to turn back for technical problems. Another 2 get hit by flak before they even get to the target. And then the number of casualties is extremely high. The Munster raid was the victim of the biggest force of Luftwaffe aircraft on a single bombing raid to the war to date. They managed to muster 350 German fighters. No exaggeration, that is true. And the casualty rate on this raid was extremely high. I don't want to get into spoilers. Only 8 craft are remaining to head it back to the UK, and not all of those get there either. There's a huge build-up to the raid. The use of music is really powerful in this episode. We get some epic shots like this one, which we haven't seen before, where they're all taxiing to the runway. Now, I know at least 4 of those craft will not be real because they've only got 4 working models. They're probably all CGI in that shot, but it looks good to me. I keep seeing people criticizing the CGI in this show, and I just don't get that criticism. For me, even the weakest shots are still pretty good. the show's an emotional roller coaster. There's a debriefing scene at the end that's very powerful. If anything, the episode is probably a bit too short. But to me, overall, I would say just on an emotional level, because by now you kind of know quite a few of the faces that are going on this mission. This is probably the most powerful, gut-wrenching episode to date. And I've got to give it a 9 out of 10. So, yeah, that's my thoughts. Drinker, I'm going to let you begin because I know we've only got you for an hour. So you'll get to go first on every question.
Oh, thank you very much.
What are you? I guess you could call it rule of seniority according to subscriber numbers, but
well, it means I've got to try and summon up an intelligent answer to all these questions, so I'll do my best. But
yeah, I'll try and make them harder as we go along. Okay, so what are your overall thoughts?
Very much in agreement. Like you say, this is a mission-based episode, so there's a lot of air combat scenes. It's very effectively shot. Mostly looks great. There's a couple of things I'm going to nitpick, but I'll get into that shortly. But I think the episode does a great job, one, of portraying how war-weary this group is at this point. They have been at this for a long time by now, and it is really taking its toll on them mentally and physically, and on their planes and equipment. Like, a lot of the time, they're getting swapped out into new aircraft that they've never flown in before. Whatever works, like whatever plane is functional at that point, they get shunted into it and off they go. There's an element of weariness and desperation about the whole thing. And yeah, it really hammers home that impression that nobody is safe. Nothing is sacred. There's no character who's, got plot armor. It seems like anyone could die at any moment. And that is the brutality and the harsh reality of air combat at this point. And I think the whole episode captures that very effectively. Like you say, there's a very good debriefing scene at the end where one of the only crews that makes it back is getting asked about it, and they have just they're going through plane after plane that got shot down, and they just have no information because they are, I guess you would call it now, PTSD from what they've been through. They're just like shell shocked by it, and they can barely process what they've seen. But just very subdued, very downbeat, very realistically played. I think it all comes together brilliantly in that, because I think you need a quiet scene like that to round it out and give us that final emotional closure on everything that we've seen. When I was talking about things I would nitpick, there was one scene that just jumped out at me as really gratuitous and stupid. It's the scene where it almost freeze frames. You get an ultra slow-mo pass when a German fighter flies right by, and it goes super slow motion, and it's like, what the fuck am I watching? Is this a Zack Snyder movie all of a sudden? I don't know why they did it. It looked really goofy. The CGI didn't look great. It took me out of the moment really unnecessarily. Apart from that,
like we were suddenly in Pearl Harbor, Michael Bay territory. For a second.
But apart from that, really liked it.
I'm just going to address this issue that someone's raised. Dre King said one thing that might have been over the top, 4 tail sections coming down in one scene, thought that was a bit too much. Well, I want you to know that I pay the same attention to chimney minutia as I do to tail wreckage in my show. And I did look at that. Now, I counted when I watched it again today. I made a note of which planes went down exactly when, and in that sequence, there are 2 planes that collide underneath the ship that we're focusing on at that time, and they go down. Mm-hmm. But in the shot right before that, returning back, I think there's 8 or 9 of them that have survived the raid and are coming back. We see another one get shot just before the 2 with the collision. So that's 3 accounted for. I'm going to get into a bit of a spoiler here. That means that we still need to see another 4 get destroyed. We don't see them get destroyed because obviously the plane that's flying back can only keep track of so much. And they speak about the 2 that they see. But what we see is the wreckage of the others coming down around them. We're not sure how many of them that wreckage represents. That's the other 4 aircraft that have been taken out.
It relies on them all getting destroyed above them and in front of them.
Yeah, it was a bit sort of cinematic, but I did quite like it. I wasn't sure if that wreckage was accounting for 4 craft. I thought it was maybe 2 or 3.
It's interesting you mentioned as well that this was like one of the biggest showings of the Luftwaffe in the war up until that point, because I did think when we saw the fighters come in, like, holy shit, there's a lot of them. This feels like I'm watching Return of the Jedi. It's like a space battle scene or something.
But it was
so big.
It was accurate.
I mean, and you can only imagine how terrifying it must have been to see 350 enemy fighters coming straight at you, and there's basically nothing to defend yourself with. Like, wow.
Yeah, it was that shot when the guy looks up and you see all the trails coming in.
Yeah.
HistoryBro, you next, sir. What was your overall thoughts on the episode, and maybe any criticisms?
Yeah, I thought it was brilliant. I thought was it the second episode where nearly the whole episode was a battle, air battle? Was that the first or the second episode?
I think that was the second one.
Both of those episodes are among the best things I've seen on TV in a while. I don't want to sort of, over gild the lily, but I thought it was very, very good. Only one shot did I think there was anything other than superb in terms of CGI. So I can't criticize it on that. The slow-mo thing, it didn't take me out of the moment too badly, but it did a bit. It seemed unnecessary. It seemed incongruous. They haven't done that before. I hope they don't really do it again. But it was okay. It didn't spoil it for me too much. Overall, it's edging up a 9 or a 10 for me. Very, very, very good. One of the things I thought was that it just seemed that there were some bits in it which just seemed quite touching to me. It worked. The play on emotions. It worked for me. There's some violent bits when people get hit, and it wasn't over the top like in Pacific. We've said before, sometimes it's a bit over the top sort of gore. So it didn't do that, and yet it didn't shy away from it or anything. No, there were just lots of bits in this episode which I thought were superb. One thing, if I can point out, was
sure
I happen to have watched quite a lot of World War II gun cam footage. It's quite a morbid thing to do, both over Europe and over the Pacific.
Do you have some sort of simulator chair that you sit in, like
I wish
Luke's perspective from the Millennium Falcon? And you...
I actually made a video about gun cam footage on my channel quite a while ago. Anyway, I've watched a lot of the real footage, and there was a few shots in this episode where you sort of see sort of POV down the sights of the gunners on the and it was just it just smacked of authenticity, just the way the bullets go through the air and stuff. It was all very, very accurate, it seemed to me. And the bit at the end, obviously, very, very emotional. It's sort of, again, for me anyway, it hit the right tone. It wasn't sort of maudlin, it wasn't sort of over the top, and it was quite powerful. One last thing I'll quickly say before I let BluCollarLoser have a go, was to say that the Luftwaffe managed to muster, a few hundred planes. And now at this time in the war, that's quite remarkable, really, because Mr. Goering's Luftwaffe was in the West, over the skies of Europe. It was surprising that they could muster that many, because they're fighting the Red Air Force on the Eastern Front. It's like a real no holds barred thing there. And a lot of the history books say that, if they could spare anything from Western Europe, it went over to the Eastern Front. So the fact that they got 350 odd fighters over Munster is quite remarkable. And, no wonder in daylight, without any fighter protection of their own, no wonder the 17s got smashed to bits, really, over Munster.
And they were already under strength. They went in with 17 craft instead of 24, and actually only 13 by the time the fighters got to them, which means you're not flying in that formation that gives you the best defense. I think also a lot of people forget that despite by 43, Germany was clearly losing. 43 and 44 were their two greatest years of output of forces and material. They were producing more tanks, more aircraft in 43 and 44. I think 44 was actually the highest year of production for them, if I remember rightly. I'd need to check. And
one thing I would say about that, there's a great book, Inside the Third Reich, by Albert Speer. And if anyone knows,
I think I've heard of him.
Yeah, and if anyone knows, he was the minister for armament and things. So if anyone would
Yeah.
know about this, it's him. And yeah, although they were able to sort of pump out more machine guns and things, the quality of everything was much lower. They were just sort of, you might be able to get the numbers out, but it just wasn't the same, right?
Yeah.
It's like you lose your first best army and you can replace the men, but they're not the same men. They're not veterans anymore. It's sort of the same when you're fighting a total war and your industry is getting pounded. Okay, you can make the numbers. On paper, you can say, we were able to make this many aeroplanes, but it will be like, a lot of times the machine work just isn't as good as it used to be, or they're just punching out parts rather than precision engineered parts and all things like this. So, and of course, when it comes to aeroplanes in big wars like World War II, your bottleneck is the pilots, not necessarily the planes themselves. You can only afford to lose so many good pilots before you're sending up dudes that have got not that much experience. But
it takes time to train them, doesn't it?
Yeah, right. Yeah,
the quality of the German pilots in 43 was definitely not the best. Blue,
well said.
Get in there.
I was wondering because, I know Drinker mentioned this last week that the first 4 episodes were directed by one person. So I'm like, okay, we're 5 episodes in. What's up with this slow motion, kind of cool, weird battle sequence? And apparently, this episode was directed by 2 people. So I guess it makes sense, which is why we're seeing a slow motion shot 10,000 feet above the air, which we've never seen before. So,
when you say it was directed by 2 people, one of the regular people and Michael Bay. Well,
apparently,
what happened there?
Well, like you said, it's one thing, how fast these planes going. Bo would probably know 10,000 miles an hour or something, and I can't see any point where they're not driving 2 miles an hour where you look over and hi.
Well, the closure speed must be enormous. Like the B-17s would be going 200 miles an hour, roughly 250. The fighters must be doing close to 300, and so you've got a closure speed of 400 or 500 miles an hour. They would be gone in a blink. You would even get a chance to look at them if they zipped right past you like that.
The human eye couldn't comprehend it was going so fast.
You certainly wouldn't be able to have that weird moment where you look right into the eyes of the pilot and be like, "Hey."
I mean, Harry Bosch is quite critical of that, and also of the CGI, which I disagree. I thought that looked okay, but
it's interesting when you mentioned as well. I actually was under the impression that they only had one working B-17 for this, because there's so many shots on the ground.
Four mock-ups,
right,
on the set. So, but I think they had one that could turn over engines and stuff. I don't know that it actually was capable of flying.
I was going to say, it's just because whenever I see the shots on the ground where they're interacting with it or climbing into it or whatever, it's always just one parked by itself, and it just seems quite obvious. This is the only one that they actually have that's real.
That's that I think that's the kind of, rather than a replica, that whenever they're close up, I think that's the don't know if it works, but I think it's a real body. I've got a super chat here which I'll quickly read out. From EZ007, clearly a relation of Bond. I found this episode mentally exhausting alongside these brave men, how much they had to deal with, unlike the adrenaline rampant battle scenes from the earlier episodes. I mean, that was a great episode. That was one of the things that I thought this episode articulated really well, was the mental strain on these people, because at the beginning of the episode, they're all mentally exhausted. They're all frayed. They're like, shit, have we got to go up again 2 days in a row? We just came off a really bad mission. Aren't we supposed to rotate? There's all that going on. And to get effective results, you wouldn't send these men on mission after mission after mission if you were trying to get the best results possible. But they did.
One thing I'd like to say is that, bear in mind exactly what point we are in the war here, late 43. So the high command, the Americans and the British, but really, people like Ike, they're looking, everything's sort of geared towards D-Day.
Yeah.
Which is June 44.
Yeah.
And they wanted to invade Europe before they actually did. Obviously, there's a lot of pressure from Uncle Joe, from Joe Stalin, to invade Western Europe as soon as they possibly could. And so they're sort of the planners back in Washington, or wherever it is in London. They're sort of desperate. They were desperate to try and really break the Luftwaffe and break Germany's industrial capability as fast as possible. Their thinking was, according to accounts and according to memoirs after the war and things, their thinking is every single day that the war is drawn out, their calculations is we're going to lose this many men and materiel and sort of political capital for every day it continues. And it's going to last. But we need to invade Europe. We need to have a D-Day as soon as we possibly can. If that means we have to throw something like the 8th Air Force or the bloody 100th, if we have to use them until they're all dead, so be it. That was their thinking. It's that sort of brutal. It's that sort of.
I think so, because as much as these aircrew losses were horrendous, they're nothing compared to the losses of men on the ground. If you stage an actual, seaborne invasion of Western Europe, and I think almost by mid 1944. It wasn't like it was pointless, but it was like the outcome of the war was well decided by that point. Clearly the Germans were going to lose. Part of the consideration of getting American and British troops into Western Europe was otherwise you might see a Soviet domination of the whole of Western Europe if they were allowed to continue advancing as they were. They had to try and meet them somewhere in Germany. Otherwise, they would, like you say, Bo, there would be no political capital after the war to try and find a post-war settlement of, hey, any chance you could send those millions of troops back to the Soviet Union, Joe? Because you're making us nervous here, my friend.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. They were, of course, wondering. Everyone knew. Well, they didn't necessarily know there would be a Cold War, the Cold War, but they knew that the Soviets, the Bolshevik Marxist-Leninists under Stalin were going to be, if nothing else, a political enemy after the war. And so they don't want the Russians to be able to get to Paris. That was one of the things after the war had finished at places like Potsdam and Yalta, where the big three would sit down and talk. Some people said to Stalin and the Soviets, they said, well done, obviously, for winning on the Eastern Front and effectively breaking the back of the Nazis. Well done. What an amazing thing. In 1939, could you even have dreamed that you'd be in the middle of Germany and having taken over all of the Balkans and Eastern Europe? And Stalin apparently just said, yeah, well, Tsar Alexander got to Paris. So, he did have designs potentially on all of Europe. And so, but from the Americans' point of view, or from the planners, not just the Americans, the British as well, they didn't really want to invade, or they weren't prepared to invade until really they had quite a massive advantage in materiel. They didn't really want to do pull the trigger on a D-Day until the Luftwaffe, at least in Western Europe, was thoroughly broken. For example, during 44 and 45, it was like the number of fighters is 20 to 1 or 25 to 1 in our favor.
Wow.
So, it gives you an idea.
Well, the problem is because it's a seaborne invasion, it's immensely difficult to do something like that. It's relatively easy to advance an army across open terrain or whatever. That's why the Soviets were doing so well in Eastern Europe by that point. But to land 1 million men by sea with the potential for airstrikes, for U-boat attacks, to get all of the equipment and all of the supplies that they need to keep going, that's a huge logistical problem to overcome. That's partly why the Germans never invaded the UK. They couldn't overcome all of those logistical issues. And it was difficult even for the combined forces of the British and the Americans with two enormous navies to do it. The outcome of D-Day was not guaranteed at all. And like you say, if they had failed, it would have meant a massive loss of men and equipment and also prestige and political capital. And it probably would have prevented another attempt for at least another year while they rebuilt their forces. And that would have been disastrous for the course of the war, or at least the post-war settlement.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Again, the planners and the political overlords, Roosevelt and Churchill and things, they didn't want to do a D-Day until they were pretty much confident, very confident, really, that they wouldn't have to do it a second time. They didn't want sort of a 60% chance of being able to take the beaches, or an 80%. They wanted 90+% chance that they would take those beaches on that day. And it's another thing about D-Day. We've all seen Saving Private Ryan and things. The fact that those beaches weren't being strafed by the Luftwaffe. That's a massive thing. That's what these guys in the 8th Air Force that's largely down to them in all sorts of ways. Not just them, also the RAF, and it was a combined warfare, total war thing. So it's not just them, but it's a remarkable thing that the beaches on D-Day we completely controlled the skies.
Yes. Let me just give Mark Kelly a shout out. So it's just a name in the chat, but I just want to tell people Mark Kelly is actually one of the victims of the post office scandal. He's a former sub postmaster.
Oh, geez.
I wrote the play about that, as many people will know, which was on 2 years before the television show, just want to say. But Mark was very supportive with the show, and he spoke to a lot of my actors.
Nice.
And
I hope he was one of the people who was exonerated.
He has been exonerated. I don't know if he's got his compensation yet, but I just want to give you a shout out to you, Mark, and of course we're all rooting for you to get your compensation as soon as possible. Actually, and Drinker, when you've seen Bates versus Post Office, I need to bring you back on the channel. We need to do a special chat with you about that to get your
I'd like to. Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. It'll be a case of me striking while the iron is extremely stone cold by that point. But I'd rather do it anyway.
I think maybe we can tie it in with Paula Venables taking the stand at the public inquiry, and I think the iron will be quite hot during that period.
No, that sounds good then.
It's also about to drop in America first week of April. It's getting an American release.
About time, thanks.
Yeah, so you guys will be able to see
like
it.
you said, for me, finding it was pretty difficult. I did find it, but boy, I had to search.
Allegedly, we won't say anything more about that. Okay. So sorry, for going off on a tangent there. Sandy,
that's all right. We totally did as well. You can tell you got a bunch of people who like history because we start talking about the origins of the Cold War and stuff.
No, I'm listen, man. I'm all about that. Well, let's get back to this episode. I want to talk about the cast because there's a couple of people I want to give a shout out. I thought you've got to remember that the majority of these performances are often done behind a mask half the time. And it's you've only got the eyes to go with. And everybody's sort of doing their best to stand out. I don't know why I didn't realize it before, but this actor, who I think is very good in the show, that's Jude Law's son.
Oh, God, yeah, you can see it as
well.
See it,
yeah.
Hope he hasn't inherited his dad's hairline.
Well, I mean, he's certainly got his talent because he's very good.
He's good.
He's got a flawless American accent, but I dare say he's probably spent a fair bit of time over there. I love the scene where they're all waiting for them to come back. And, one aircraft comes down and it's not even from the 100th. It's landing in the wrong place, probably because they've got injured on board and they just need to land anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's just a really powerful moment. I've just pointed out to Harry, no, there were no ahistorical chimneys in this episode, but I'll be all over that, Harry. Don't worry in future. Somebody else said that they thought that the soundtrack for the Shining was used during the takeoff sequence. That's not the same music, but it may well be that they put that on as a temp track and said, we want it to be like this. And there's an interesting comment here from Usto Gay, who says one of the producers said they conceived this episode as a horror movie and said the music that's the same comment about The Shining. They probably put that temp track on and said, give us something like that.
There's definitely a sense of foreboding with it when they're taking off. And this isn't like a big triumphant, like, hey, we're going to kick some ass, boys. It's, oh, God, we're going into it again. And a lot of us are probably not going to come back from this one. It's just like that grim resolution to go and get the job done, I suppose.
I'm not sure if you guys know, is this so far the most on-screen casualties we've seen?
It is.
I think so, yeah.
Because look how many characters are in this. And this is taken from the briefing before they take off in episode 1. Most of the characters in this shot are now either missing or dead. So, there's only like about 8 or 9 people that are not missing or dead in that shot. So, casualty rate rather high, to say the least.
And it does a great job of making you feel for every bomber crew that you see, even like the ones that haven't had a lot of screen time, but suddenly you're with them and like their plane's going down. And, there was that scene where a guy's had his face blown off and he's dead already, but they want to put a parachute on him and drop him out so that like he at least gets a burial. He doesn't just get blown up with the plane.
While your plane is going down and on fire, it's not really...
It's not practical, but it's just like that human touch of like not wanting to just abandon one of your friends to just get annihilated like that.
This guy takes either a part of a round or part of a shrapnel to the leg, played by actor Elliot Warren. He does a really good job with this character.
Is that when he has to pull it out like as a piece of flak?
And he's spewing up on the runway when he gets out at the end there. Not sure if you guys know the bit I mean. But
one thing I thought with this episode is we talked about it, I think, after the very first episode, or certainly after the second episode. We talked about the sort of the balancing act between sort of very in-depth characterization, which you get in Band of Brothers, really, don't you, to be fair? And then sort of a super high overview thing where it's too zoomed out and you don't know who anyone is, you don't know anyone's name. And that was one of the slight criticisms we had. I felt like by this episode now, the dynamic is it's settled down and you sort of know who you need to know. You're familiar with who you need to be familiar with, and you sort of you get the balance that they've deliberately struck in this show about people that they're going to give they're going to give a lot of characterization to, and those that aren't. And for me, again, I've got to say, it works. I never really bought too much into the criticism that they weren't doing enough characterization. For me, it was okay. It was always okay.
Yeah.
And anyway, for me, in this episode particularly, it definitely sort of settled down, and you're sort of happy isn't the right word, but you're sort of happy to know who you know and let those go, let those be killed who you don't know, and move on. And I don't know, it works for me.
Well, I think it works particularly well because, as I was saying earlier, there's not a sense of like, oh, well, there's the core group of characters who are probably going to be okay, and then there's just a bunch of extras who are just there to get killed. You know, you get that sense that like, well, nobody's really safe, and anyone could just die at any moment. So you learn to, I guess, appreciate them when they're on screen because you don't know how long they're going to be around for now. I did think to myself, like, well, what can you do? Like, say you wanted to characterize people a bit more and have the audience identify with certain people more. What can you do to improve on that? Because really, between missions, there's not a huge amount that they're doing. Like, they're kind of just on base, like having drinks and like talking to each other about like the next mission or whatnot. And there's not a huge amount of like downtime between missions. I don't know if you could do it in the form of flashbacks before they enlisted or something that fills in their backstories a little bit, but then you're gonna harm the pace if you start doing that.
I would have rather just seen all that in episode 1 if we're going to have it. I don't really want to be going back in time to a moment with mum and dad in episode 7. I mean, the way that we got the real emotional punch was through this character who's played by Louis Getterix, which sounds like a character from Asterix the Gaul, but I give him his due. He's really good in this. British actor, flawless American accent in my view, and he writes a letter to the wife of the navigator character that's been promoted and is now basically a desk jockey. I forget the character's name, and he said, "Oh my God!" When he sees him come back because he thought he died, I wrote your wife a letter, and he's like, "You didn't send it, did you?" No, it's here, and he gives it back to him. And then he goes on the mission and his friend doesn't. And then, at the end of the episode, we got this very poignant scene where he's reading out the letter, which we hear in voiceover, which doesn't always work. But in that scene, it really got me in the feels. I thought it was really good. And
no, his reaction to it was great. And it was a nice, it was a nice turnabout for that, like the letter that was never expected to get sent. Because, hey, I made it back after all. But then you actually, when he gets to read it, it's like this person's thoughts about him, like such a great insight into him, like a letter that he should never have been able to read in the first place. Like, it's just an interesting turnabout and one of the random things that can happen in a war like that.
Thanks for that shot, Blue.
A quick screenshot for you.
Earlier on, Drinky used the term plot armor. Which I think is a very interesting, good term. The only person in the whole thing that I feel has got any of that is that navigator dude. And that is also because I think in the first episode, he explicitly says, or explicitly sort of makes clear that he survives.
And he's the narrator, and he's referring back, isn't he? He's referring back in time in his dialogue. So
like Winters in Band of Brothers or something.
Yeah.
So So with the exception of him, yeah, no, it feels like absolutely nobody is safe. Now, for such a big show like this, that's quite remarkable, I think. There's the thing like you get in, say, I don't know, all Bond films, for example, or Captain Kirk, where they live, right? They have to live, and yet there's some sort of magic to make any sort of suspense out of that, right? So they've not sort of, they don't need to go down their route. They're not going down that route. It's genuine. Anyone could die. And so, I actually, I wasn't exaggerating earlier when I said that this and the other episode that was all about air battle was some of the best stuff I've seen on TV in quite a long time. Got nothing but praise really for it, to be honest.
I'm going to call it now that, I mean, like Band of Brothers and like Pacific, there are some actors that are coming to it who've got quite a few credits and pretty good careers already, like Callum Turner, Austin Butler, and Barry Keogh have all been shoehorned into big projects. But there will be some other actors that will break out of this and have very solid careers. He's going to be one of them.
I think so.
I'm going to call now. There's a couple of others as well I could mention, including the guy that we saw who gets shot in the leg. I think he's another one. And it's a credit to them that they're able to kind of, because everybody's faces look quite similar. A lot of them have got little tashes, and you have to really know your art to get a lot out of a scene where you don't have a lot of dialogue, but you've got to convey a lot of emotion. And this is a really stellar cast. I'm not watching this show and going, "Ooh, that guy's not quite on par." I haven't had a moment like that yet. So
I'll tell you the thing that's annoying me about this show is there's no strong, empowered black women piloting these B-17s.
So frustrating.
Furious about this. I can't believe it.
Yeah.
Such a blatant rewriting of history.
It's sickening. It's sickening.
We have the Red Tails coming up. I actually, though, I caught a bit of the BAFTAs before we came on, and I can't remember.
Night, isn't it?
Yeah, I can't remember the name of the actress, but the lady who was up for Best Supporting Actress, who was in The Holdovers with Paul Giamatti.
Oh yeah,
she won, and I really rated her in that film. I thought she was really good, and she was the least known actress in that category. Yeah. So, we're the outcasts. So I always root for the underdog. So I really wanted her to win, and she won. So I was proper chuffed to see that she got that award.
Nice.
She gave a very nice speech as well. So I can't remember the Best Supporting Actor. They all blended into one for me. But, oh, no, it was Robert Downey Jr. Sorry, Robert. Can't believe I said that.
Oh, for Oppenheimer.
Yeah, he got it for Oppenheimer. And what a suit he was wearing as well. It was quite an impressive suit.
Have you guys all seen Oppenheimer? Just a quick aside. Because I saw that a few weeks ago, and I actually thought it was really good. I don't know why I was going into it with a cynical mind, expecting it to be crap, but I actually really liked it. I thought it was very good. One of the better films I've seen.
I think it was Napoleon that's probably tainted your opinion of historical epics recently.
Yeah. Boy.
I thought technically it was a really amazing film. I'm sorry I know everybody loves it, but emotionally, it just left me cold. I just couldn't engage.
It's a cold story.
It's
a cold story.
I guess that's the point. I guess there's no real winners in that story, is there?
Yeah. I just thought it was written very well. I did think the writing was.
But I've only got Will for another 21 minutes, so let's not go down an Oppenheimer rabbit hole.
Sorry, yeah.
And Blue, I know you wanted to say something when we put the smashed face up on.
I forgot. No, I just said excellent makeup job. And you get that impact,
yeah, the makeup in this film is first rate. The people keep bashing the CGI in this show, and I just don't get it. I mean, like, how good do these shots need to look? One thing I have noticed is that the smaller the device you watch this show on, the worse these shots look.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
But if you've got a big telly and you get Apple Plus on there, and You know,
I think it looks at its best when it's the air combat scenes like this. I think it looks at its worst when you see the B-17s on the ground taxiing for takeoff, that sort of thing, where they have to interact with like real shots of real landscapes, because you can see the very obvious join. I saw it a few times during the takeoff scene where they obviously had to like replicate the B-17 model quite a few times, and like the shadows just looked all wrong. Like the wheels didn't seem to like joining up with the ground properly. It was just a bit weird, and yeah, I could see where maybe they didn't quite have the resources they would have needed to do something like this really effectively.
On your IMAX screen in your garden, how's it look?
Well, I was sitting in my hot tub drinking my champagne, you know.
Yeah, that's Drinker's Own brand.
No, it was literally on the TV behind me, so like relatively big, but like not like ridiculous or anything. And so I don't know, like it's probably similar to what most people have at home.
Yeah,
and yeah, I could just see it during scenes like that. The air combat scenes generally I thought were fine. Like the bits where like people mentioned the falling wreckage looked a bit fakey, and probably a bit overdone.
I mean, I haven't seen a lot of falling wreckage in the air when I've been in a plane, thankfully. So
yeah,
I don't have. I'll be honest, I don't have like a huge reference of even photographs from World War II of things breaking up in the air. There's footage, black and white, grainy footage, but there's not a lot of stills. So, if any, I mean, it looked fine to me. Yeah, okay, maybe a bit CG, but we know it's CG, so you can't quite get away from that.
There was a scene that really stuck with me actually from a couple of episodes back where they're flying through, like, again, similar situation, wreckage coming down, and one of them is like a body falling out of a plane.
Yeah, I remember that.
And he hits the wing of like their bomber and just kind of splatters all over it. And I just thought, oh God, that's, you know, that things like that probably happened, and it just must have been so destroying if you were flying that bomber. There's nothing you could do about it.
It decapitated his body, didn't it? It was
like, I
think it kind of split in half. Yeah, because he hit the wing, you know, like that.
Lance, you'll know this. In Operation Market Garden, there's accounts of guys hitting planes below.
I mean,
so it definitely happened.
Yeah, there's several witness accounts from Market Garden of gliders breaking up in midair, and people seeing like literally all the components, the Jeep, the anti-tank gun, whatever was in it, with all the people falling out of it, like, you know, toy ragdolls. And there's several accounts of that, and there's accounts of bodies flying past Dakota wings, and one of them going into a propeller was one I read, which just welcome Diabolical Souls to the channel. Just he's at the bottom there,
the gooch.
Hey, man.
One other thing I would like to quickly say, Lance, and then get Drinker's thoughts on it, seeing as, you know, time's limited. There was in this where a lot of German fighters came down, and it sort of proved the concept of the B-17 being sort of its own fortress, being able to protect itself with a bunch of 50 cal, just didn't work. And I thought, for me, I wonder what the Drinker thinks about this. For me, they put it across in this episode quite well, without ever explicitly saying it, that these B-17s didn't have very much protection. They couldn't really protect themselves very well against a massed fighter attack. Apart from maybe at the very end when there's that one trying to get back and it seems to take out 4 fighters on its own or something. But other than that,
this is where I was going to go with it, to be honest. Is like, again, probably something I pointed out last time, the surprising number of enemy fighters that they're able to take out with their like turret guns, their 50 cals, which I'm no expert on World War II combat situations like that, but I imagine it would be a super rare thing for any like individual gunner to take out an enemy fighter. It would be holy shit, I can't believe that worked, you know, because they're so fast, and like your chances of even hitting one, never mind scoring a fatal hit on it, would be super low. And there you've got this one like making this crazy like defiant stand where it takes out like fighters left, right, and center, and nobody's even like that perturbed by it. Like, oh yeah, you took out another one, good job, like, you know, Brad or whatever.
Don't get cocky, kid.
Yeah,
I was waiting for someone to say that line. At one point.
Yeah, I mean, I assume, like we said before, they're strength was to fly in close formation with all these guns pointing in every direction and just throwing a hail of lead at enemy fighters to try and keep them at bay. And perhaps hoping that they are well enough armored that they can absorb a fair amount of hits and enough to keep going anyway.
Melvin Deeply's pointed out, and I have read about this story, that there was a fellow who fell from 18,000 feet without a parachute and lived. I believe quite a bit of tree canopyage was involved. That was just Drinker on his last flight to Florida. He got lost on the way to the
I look like I'm over the States. I'm just going to jump out here.
Yeah, I can see the convention center. Here we go.
Yeah.
Remember Crank 2? That was an old joke. Like, how'd you fly a helicopter, hit a car and live? Yeah, it happened once before. Not a big deal. And Jason Statham can do it no problem.
Walk it off. I tell you, there's one bit that did make me laugh. Actually, is when they're in you're with a B-17, one of the ones that gets shot down fairly early, where one of their engines quits. They look to the right and like the propellers just fly right off it. Like all of the propellers just detach from the engine. They're like, oh well, guess that one's done then.
Yep.
Well, they were so mass produced back in Seattle. They were just pumping those things out like every day. Those things. It wouldn't surprise me if some things would like fall off so easily during the war.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, you can kind of imagine as well, because they're like the thing's rotating so fast. If the blades were to come off, there's a good chance they might fly right into the fuselage and cut them down in half.
Another thing I've seen people talk about is the dive sequence with this plane piloted by or captained by the actor Nate Mann. I forget the character name, and again, another actor I'd say has got a good career ahead of him. And everybody's saying that scene is ridiculous. However, if you read the true accounts of the crew that came back from that craft, and they're the only account that we have to go by, they all said that happened. Now, one thing that I got a little bit confused by, and I'm still not completely clear on it, despite repeated viewing of this scene, and it'd be good to get Bo's knowledge on this. And I know aerial stuff isn't your forte, but there's a scene where somebody shouts, "My God, a rocket!" or something, and we see a rocket come in, and it explodes, and then somebody says, "My God, there's a big hole in the wing right now." But when he says there's a hole in the wing, he's looking up, and the next shot is the hole in the wing of the plane above them that separates, not their plane, and that's the plane that then collides into the second plane, and both of those planes go down. So that line, all of that exchange of dialogue is actually quite misleading. There is a partial bit of damage in their wing, but the rocket didn't hit their plane. It hit the one in front of them, which is the one that then went down and collided with the other one. So it's quite a confusing sequence. I did a bit of digging, and I don't know whether they were being tested in 43, but from what I could find out, the rockets were only being employed by Germans in air combat in 44. So were they being tested in 43 in small numbers, maybe, or what do we know about that?
Yeah, so no, I don't know about that. I don't know the exact historical fact, but that did. If I had to guess, though, if I had to put money on it, that did strike me as odd. I didn't think they were being used that early. I thought they were being used right at the end of the war. However, I've got to put a lot of faith in the researchers of this. I don't think they would just make something up like that. I feel like they wouldn't do something like that. But my thoughts were, if you'd asked me earlier today before I watched the episode, when were the Germans deploying air-to-air rockets? I thought it was right at the very end of the war. That was my understanding, but I might be wrong.
Weren't they mounted on those? Weren't they mounted on those crazy rocket-powered fighters? Right, because they were like 262. Because it was one of the only ways that they could accurately shoot at enemy aircraft. Because the idea, I think they called it the Comet, right? So it was a rocket-powered German fighter. It would launch itself off the ground, up it went to intercept these B-17s. But once you ignited the solid fuel, the liquid boosters, you couldn't shut them off. So it just had to go. And so you'd be closing at like a crazy speed, like 400 or 500 miles an hour. And you only got one opportunity to open fire on these things. And it was designed that it would trigger its salvo of rockets that would just launch in a spread that would give you some kind of chance of hitting something. Then you would fly up over them and then glide back down to land.
Damn.
It was an insane machine.
Sounds like
this is the 262, which was the more commonly deployed fighter, but there was one called the Comet, which was like this tiny, more kind of pod-shaped thing.
So
that
that's
was the other
jet. That's jet powered, though, isn't it? Not rock. What we're looking at there, anyway. That's sort of.
This is a jet powered. This is a jet powered fighter. They were the ones that used those rockets.
And I might be wrong, but I don't believe the Americans ever used jet fighters during World War II. It was quite soon after. Like in Korea,
it was too late. Yeah, it was too late. If they would have had them, they would have won the war. That's what they talk about. The technology came too late during that period.
So it's just one more example of where the Germans were ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of these things, they came too late to really alter the course of the war. It was like when they had like the Tiger tanks, the Panther tanks,
like
the
incredibly difficult. Yeah, incredibly difficult things to knock out, but there was never enough of them to make a difference, and they really arrived too late to alter the course of the war. Same, like the V2 rockets, same deal with them.
We can always depend on the knowledge of chat, because Analog Bath led the Luftwaffe using BR-21 rockets in mid-43.
Wow.
Not as direct hit weapons, but mostly by HE or Duade as volley shots. Yeah, kind of to create an explosion, like a flak explosion, effectively. And
remarkable, really, isn't it? I mean, you've got to give it to the German engineers.
Yeah.
It's remarkable that they were doing that. It's a long way ahead of the curve.
Even in medicine, things were just like very primitive versions of the guided munitions that we have now. It's just like the technology just wasn't quite there for them to make it viable, I suppose. But yeah, imagine if they'd been like 3 or 4 years ahead with this development, the war might have been vastly different.
Oh yeah.
Judy Hops, who I've had a little bit of back and forth with on commentaries on my comments section on my channel. Always happy to engage with people. She's talking about the dive. She believes it's nonsense. Now, I mean, all I'm going to say is at the end of the day, if you're a filmmaker and you're going to go and make a film about a true story World War II incident, which I've tried to do twice, the best sources are the immediate accounts that are given by the men as soon as they get back, which are their after action reports, effectively. Because they're generally considered to be the most accurate, and from that point onwards, it gets diluted again and again and again and again. So, as a filmmaker, you've got to pick your sources, and then it's up to you whether you believe those sources and also how you present those sources dramatically. All I'm saying is that the sources that they relied on for that sequence, that's their account of what happened, whether it really happened or whether it's accurate.
What's like, Lance? What's that old?
Were you there? Is all.
What's that cliche? It's like if 5 people see a car accident, you get 5 different stories. What happened?
Yeah.
Eyewitness testimony is notoriously unreliable.
Yeah, I mean, so Judy may well be right. It may well be nonsense, or it may just be very exaggerated.
I was a paramedic for 15 years, and trust me, when it comes to car accidents, everyone has a different story.
I can imagine in the stress and chaos of a combat situation like that as well, people are not going to remember perfectly, like the adrenaline's pumping. I think the after action interrogation that you see at the end of that episode is good evidence of it. Like they get asked about plane after plane, and they've just got no comment about it because they just can't remember it. They were fighting for their lives.
Yeah.
Well. Scary. Did anybody else have any other criticisms of the episode at all? Apart from we've had the slow motion sequence, so I think we can say that rockets did exist at this time. Anyone else, anything else they want to pick up, or indeed praise for anything we haven't mentioned?
I did like Lance in the beginning. They didn't cover too much, but definitely we go through everybody on the panel and watching the whole moral question for soldiers that, hey, listen, we have to do a mission and we're going to kill a bunch of civilians. And that's something that everybody has at some point go through. Like, a lot of women and children are going to be killed. And boy, it's like just dealing with that mental anguish, because people talk about, obviously World War II and Hiroshima, but like it had to be done. But just imagine being the 2 guys who actually had to press that button. Like what that does to you mentally. Like,
sorry. Well, that's something I want to say, not necessarily a criticism or a praising of the episode, but just another sort of historical point is Munster. What was done to Munster is unbelievable. It's one of those. It's like a Hamburg, like a Dresden, like a Cologne, like a Berlin. They almost wiped it off the map. It looks like Hiroshima almost. They hit Munster again and again and again.
You're right.
And,
yeah,
and you know, it's war. I'm not trying to cast shadow on what the Allies did. Nothing like that. It's just a statement of historical fact that Munster was a beautiful medieval city, a jewel left over from the medieval era, and it was razed to the ground. And it's sad to see. If you ever look at pictures of Munster after World War II, it's very sad. It's very sad.
Yeah, because I think so far, like, what, we're 5 episodes in, we haven't really talked about the whole, like, the civilian casualties. It's something that people don't talk about, but it should be talked about, because that's why they say war. There really is no winners.
Yeah, well, Bomber Harris and a lot of people on the Allied command, they were talking. Churchill talked about total war. It's that every civilian is an enemy combatant. Okay, you're not a soldier, but you help to feed the soldiers. You help to make their munitions. You're an enemy combatant. Every man, woman, and child, old man, every piece of livestock, every silo of grain is the enemy that needs to be annihilated. It's mad, really, but that's total war. That's what they were dealing with.
Well, I think particularly once the V2s started landing on London, like that was like a renewed blitz. Churchill did press quite hard for unrestricted aerial bombing of German cities.
Yeah,
just and he wanted them to know as well. He said, like, we're going to announce to the Germans, like, if you don't stop with this V2 bullshit, we're going to like flatten this town, then we're going to flatten that town, and then the next one, and we're not going to stop until there's literally no town standing left in Germany. And it took quite a bit of work to persuade him not to just go all in with that.
Actually, as Judy points out, the Germans were first to do it with Rotterdam, which basically brought about the surrender of Holland. Otherwise, they were going to do it to Amsterdam as well.
Yeah, I mean, the Germans did do a number on London. The Blitz was no joke. It was no joke. Tens and tens of thousands of civilians killed, hundreds of thousands more maimed and wounded. It was a total war. But when you look back when you hear the rhetoric from people like Churchill or Truman or Roosevelt, like if you hear Truman's speech when he declares the atomic bombing of Japan, he basically says, I will annihilate every man, woman, and child in Japan if I have to. He's basically, I'm paraphrasing, but that's not much either. But that's what he's saying. I will burn down every one of your cities until you surrender. How about that? It's looking back on it in the 2020s. It's chilling. It really is.
I think in the case of Japan, it was the only way to get them to quit, because they were just not up for surrendering in war. That just wasn't their thing. And they had to make it very clear, we're just going to keep doing this until you give up.
Drinker, I know you've got to go swimming with whales shortly.
Just to put that into context, everyone, I'm going to be watching Star Trek 4 with Mauler, the one with the whales. So
good luck.
So before you duck out, and thank you again for coming on, and I certainly hope you'll come back next week, and we'll if it suits everybody, I'd rather go at 9 o'clock next week if that works for everyone.
Whatever you want.
We'll try to be there.
Well, I know that I know that Blue likes to go to church. So just a couple of things to let
free wine. Come on.
Just a couple of things to let people know. It's a bit off topic, but I'll mention this now before Drinker goes. I've just confirmed that I've got Damon Herriman coming on the channel for an industry interview. He played Charles Manson in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. He's also the main boss man in Mr. In Between, which Drinker, I keep saying you've got to watch that show. You'll love it. You'll absolutely love it. Australian sort of crime comedy, I guess is the best way to describe it. But he's in pretty much every episode of that. He's had an absolutely fantastic career as an actor, and just confirmed him today, this morning. I keep mentioning it. Everybody should watch 5 Days in Memorial, one of the best television shows I've ever seen.
It's not easy to watch.
Yeah, it's not an easy watch. Wow. Raven Dowder, who's actually one of the main characters on Star Trek Discovery, she's coming on the 5 Days at Memorial special that we're going to do in March, on the last Sunday of March. And I think I've got another member of cast joining me on that stream as well. And I've also got the editor of 2000 AD coming on this Wednesday.
I'm
who
looking
did
forward to that one.
did all the golden years of Strontium Dog, Judge Dredd, all the best Judge Dredd stories,
Wow.
Judge Death, Steve McManus. Yeah, he's coming on Wednesday. So
Nice.
so I've racked them up this week, and then of course we had Gail Ann Hurd drop in last week during the Tremors interview.
That's pretty cool.
It was pretty cool. I had to mention it.
Classy lady, very classy.
She
thought
was-
it was a
she was
great
fan-
interview.
She was fantastic.
That's a woman who essentially produced my childhood. You know, like all of the biggest movies from like
Yeah.
the 80s and 90s.
Yeah,
Like she was
yeah.
pretty much involved in them.
I
Damn.
pretty much said that on behalf of yourself and the rest of us. If you watch that section of the interview, I said that just before she left and put it as eloquently as I could. I'm hoping that she'll come back on for a long one-to-one interview. Of a short distance, maybe 9 hours or something like that. Drinker, thanks so much for coming back on. I really appreciate the way you keep supporting my channel. It's very, very much appreciated.
No, we honestly need more channels like yours, man. Like you have that passion for the industry and you're able to bring all these great guests on and give your audience like a great insight and a chance to ask all of these people like the questions that they've always wanted to. I think it's great stuff. And yeah, I enjoy coming in for these little streams. I'll try to be in as many as I can.
Oh, bless you, sir. Well,
Thanks, Will.
Thanks very much. Really appreciate it. The inside man has just arrived just to see you leave. Great having you on. And,
well, I just want to say it was nice meeting you, Drinker.
Likewise, man. Sorry we didn't get a chance to talk more, but during the next one, then we'll.
I know you're a busy guy. So.
Another time. Give Mauler our best.
Yeah, I shall. All right, I won't take up any more of your time, guys. So enjoy the rest of the stream, and I'll catch you later.
Buddy. Have fun.
Take care.
Yeah.
Take care, mate.
Cheers, mate.
What a legend. I'm just going to read out this super chat quickly. Judy Hops, who's been very interactive on my comments and stuff. Just want to say I've been 50-50 on Masters of the Air, but I've loved your analysis each week, Outcast. Here's some support for the channel. You know, look, that's really kind. And I'll say this about super chats because I don't get many. Times are really hard right now. Like, especially as the bank machine just took my card the other day when I went to buy a Chinese takeaway. I mean, for God's sake. And they were like, we don't take cash. So we don't take cards. So get some cash from the card machine next door. So I went to use it and it just took my card. It wasn't that I didn't have any money in it, but now I've got like nothing for 5 days. Anyway, but that's a segue of saying times can be really hard. So to spend £10 on a super chat for someone on a YouTube stream that, you know, you might be better off putting into your food budget or buying a decent bottle of wine from the top shelf only selection of Sainsbury's. I don't underestimate that. So just, you know, thank you. I really appreciate it. Whip round for Outcast Chow Mein. Funnily enough, that was pretty close to what I was going to have. So Inside Man, we haven't heard from you yet. We've kind of been going through the episode talking about different aspects of it. But just give us your overall impression. And sorry, mate, we went an hour earlier today. I did drop you a message.
Oh, right. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I did drop you a message.
Sorry, mate.
We were going to go at 9. It's all Drinker's fault. You can blame him. So it's to do with Star Trek 4.
Game of Scotsman.
But what were your thoughts?
I thought it was probably the best one so far.
Agreed.
There was so much to this. Still, I mean, I got a level. I'm having a little bit of a problem with it, and that is that it just feels like it's getting started, and then it's over.
Yeah. And the episodes are too short. I mean, that's an ongoing.
Very short.
I just feel like they could be 5 minutes longer because the credits are very long, and considering how long the credits are, and there's quite a big gap before even anyone's name comes up at the beginning.
Yeah.
I'm amazed at the small number of actors that get billed at the beginning of because otherwise you're in this big huge billing block at the end, you know. Callum Turner and Austin Butler are getting billed at the front of every episode. Even Butler must have a good agent because he's getting billing even on the episodes he's not even in.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah.
So,
but it was. I think by far this was the best one. This was definitely the best one. I thought it was the aerial stuff, the inside the aircraft. I thought it was absolutely thrilling, really quite exhilarating to watch, but terrifying at the same time. Just not enough episode for me in any of them. But this was the one that I thought, yeah, this is really it now. But all of a sudden, all too soon, it was over. And that's the only thing that I was really disappointed in with this episode. It was just over way too quick.
Yeah,
sorry.
I
was just going to say, yeah, if I could echo that sentiment, actually, I get the thing, and it says it's 48 minutes long, but nearly 10 minutes of that are the closing credits. And it just feels super short. There's things, I don't know if you guys ever had this experience when you're a little kid and there's something you're sort of you love and it's on a little bit late and you're allowed to stay up to watch that thing, but you have to go to bed immediately after it's finished. Something you really love. For me, it was like Red Dwarf or Blackadder or something like that. Showing my age. And it feels like it's over in like 4 minutes. This episode felt like that to me. It felt like I'm exaggerating there, but it felt like 20 minutes, 25 minutes at most. It obviously was a bit longer than that.
Absolutely agree with that.
I wanted twice the length of it, to be honest.
No,
that's
completely agree with that.
That's one thing, Bo. I'm not sure if it's different for you, but like I was actually writing this down for Lance. Like I checked on Apple TV. Now, Apple TV for me said it's listed at 57 minutes, but the problem is, 57 minutes. I actually timed it where it's like, okay, the recap is 1:42. Okay, 2-minute recap.
Yeah.
They open it. They talk for 5 minutes. They do a 2-minute opening theme. Okay, then of course, then the episode ends. Then we have a 2-minute. Oh, next week on Masters of the Air. Then we have 7 minutes of like post-credit scene. So. In all reality, out of 57 minutes, there's a good 15 minutes of non-air. And in the actual, everyone praised the action sequence, which is fantastic, but I actually timed it. The actual action sequence is 20 minutes. That's 20 minutes out of a 57-minute episode. So there's damn sure, like Lance said, it's like out of 57 minutes, why do you have 15 minutes of promos?
Good point. Let me just address the running time here. So Darth Plato said Banner Brothers had a running time of 50 minutes. That's not true, actually.
They're a bit longer, weren't they?
No, they were longer. And also no episode had the exact same running time. And in fact, one episode had a running time, I think, of about 66 minutes. There were several that were over an hour. And the closing credits were incredibly quick, incredibly short. The credits here are long. Now, clearly, I need to mention that my bank card got swallowed more often because I've had a couple more super chats. I'll
ask, you don't get, Lance.
I'll probably go on to mention my gas bill in a minute, which is probably going to be about £1,000, and I don't know how I'm going to pay for that. Hugger Historian today, thanks for such great conversation. So, just to mention, Sandy Q is an American Civil War historian who actually popped on my channel. She was watching me play and get thoroughly beaten the Battle of Antietam, which, by the way, I played again today, Sandy, just to try a different tactic. I'll tell you about that another time. And then Melvin has also splooged for some prawn crackers and then given me an extra $5 there. So,
great guy.
Hang on, wait, there's some dessert coming as well. Darth Queefus. That's a brilliant name. I'm loving that name. I'd like to thank Bo for his Epoch series. Brilliant. Also loving these streams. So clearly I've got to give that tip to Bo. Well, when we go down the pub, mate, that's you sorted for one drink or half a pint, probably.
No, cheers. I really appreciate anyone mentioning the Epoch thing. It's sort of my baby. I really, really appreciate anyone that watches it. Because
can you chuck a link for that to me in the private chat, and I'll put it in the the chat stream there. I'm always up for promoting my guests' channels and whatnot. So just a couple of other comments. I'm curious to see how long episode 6 will be with the actual content. This one's listed at 1 hour 1 minute. The trailer for the next episode, and I did watch it. Normally I don't, but I thought, okay, let me see what's coming up. It looks like it's 50% I'm dealing with PTSD because everybody died, and 50% escape and evasion. Englander, where are you? This kind of thing. I'm not too sure. When we
For
get
you,
into
the war is over.
But yeah, for you, the war is over. When we get into that prisoner of war stuff, you know, I kind of, because there are great movies about prison camps, and there's very gritty ones. Then you've got your more kind of family fare, Great Escape stuff, although that can be quite a dark movie at times. But there's a lot of films about prison camps and that stuff.
Yeah.
I kind of want this to focus on the air and the people that come back and the stuff that's happening back in the UK.
Yeah.
I would like to see. I'll tell you what was missing for me was I wanted a scene with the senior officers when they realise the numbers that are coming back. I wanted a scene. I know it's all there in the looks and what's not said, and yeah, that'll work. But it would have been nice to have seen them go back into that command room. That I think we see it for the first time this episode, where the guy's plotting the mission and everything. And there's the big table, and somebody spills a cup of coffee. Right, great production design in that set, by the way. But I would have liked to seen back in that set with all of those senior people kind of coming back in and having that kind of Christ, you know, how can we keep sending them up like this sort of situation? You know, now we don't have a squadron here on base. What are we going to do here?
Yeah.
So that would have been nice, I think, to put in.
I actually completely agree. The scenes, they've done it a couple of times now, where it's the sort of the senior brass telling them what the mission's going to be. I hate to sound a bit like a broken record, but large, you know, in A Bridge Too Far, there's the great scene with, is it Edward Fox, isn't it?
The operation is called Market Garden. Here is the airborne element. We are the ground force. I can recite that whole speech.
We are the cavalry. Yeah. That is a superb scene.
It is. And it really happened. It really happened as well.
Apparently it's almost word for word. Yeah. I would like them to do. Yeah, I would be happy if they draw those scenes out a bit more. Wouldn't be a problem for me. Absolutely.
But just, I guess what I'm saying is
you have to remember that
curtain a bit.
Yeah.
Sorry, Inside Man, go on.
Yeah, no, I was going to say. I mean, I completely agree with you. But I do feel that there's more left out than is kept in, which is quite bizarre to me. I'm finding it a little bit frustrating because I know what's been left out. I know what's not there.
Yeah. For those 49 people that are watching, Inside Man, it's called the Inside Man because he worked on the show. He was he worked on the show. He knows what was shot and what wasn't. And again, I think you raised this last week. What is it with this restrictive running time? We're not in the days of BBC One, BBC Two, ITV, and Channel 4. We're in the digital era where the running time can be whatever you want it to be. If these episodes were 80 minutes long each, or 90 minutes, I mean, I'd quite happily watch feature-length episodes of Masters of the Air, no problem. I just think
absolutely right.
Is it the pervading mentality of people's attention spans are too short and we don't want them flipping over to Amazon? Or
I think that's part of it. So
I remember last year, House of the Dragon became very popular. HBO is not Apple, but like House of the Dragon, to my knowledge, some episodes were they were like 90 minutes long. And
they were of different lengths. Yeah, I've got the
so it's like and like even like Stranger Things, they broke up to what was it? Stranger Things, the final episode was like 2 hours long. Instead of making it 2 1-hour episodes, it was just like 1 hour and 45-minute episode or something for like the season finale of Stranger Things. So and that's it with Netflix. Netflix doesn't have like, hey, like next week on Stranger Things or like a recap. They just like show the whole hour 45-minute episode. So I don't get that.
Yeah, I've got a funny feeling that there's probably been a study on actual watch time.
I'll look up in a second.
What's the what they
that's
consider to be the optimal maximum watch time. Yeah, it really is. That's really depressing.
Yeah. So Wailing Drink had to duck out because he was on for the first day. He's recording a thing on Star Trek 4. So But thank you very much for coming on. Stay with us, man. My guests are very interesting. We've got a man who worked on the show with us. We've got HistoryBro, who knows everything about World War II chimney and air-to-air rocket minutiae. So, you know, you can ask for a better panel, mate.
I must admit, the runtime thing for me is also exasperating. Now, I'm one of those people who's got a fairly long attention span. I mean, sitting down to a very, very long sort of 4-hour Lawrence of Arabia thing's not a problem for me. I do get that perhaps I don't want to cast shadow over Zoomers, but over, you know, some younger people might not have such a long attention span. However, you know, an hour, even an hour and a half isn't that much to ask. If the storytelling is good, if the quality of the thing you're watching is good, an hour and a half it shouldn't be a problem.
Well, I mean, even 60 minutes is just, because these episodes are around 41 to 42 minutes each, right?
Yeah.
Not including the credits. So if it was 60 minutes, you've got an extra 15 minutes of scenes. That's at least another 3 scenes minimum, maybe 4 or 5, depending on the writing and so on. And I just feel, yeah, I mean, this show is good. Don't get me wrong. And I know I was hypercritical on a couple of things on episode 4, which I'm still getting comedy messages from the internet at large about. But the reason that I'm pernickety is because this is not produced by, you know, Bob Smith and Fred Smith. It's produced by Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg. These are huge names. Apple knew it was going to be part of their whole launch of being online. This was a show that was actually due to launch with Apple Plus. The only reason we're getting it now is because of the COVID thing, because the shoot got disrupted with lockdown. It was one of the first things to shut down, and it was one of the first things to restart. And Inside Man, you know, because you went through all of that with them.
Yeah.
So it was supposed to debut, wasn't it? Originally supposed to debut in the summer of 21.
It was shot in 21, kind of finished in 21. Really supposed to have been there in 22.
Because I thought originally it was supposed to shoot in 2020.
Yeah, it goes way back. It goes back even further than that, as well. You know. I mean, that it was originally called the Mighty Eighth, and all other kinds of name changes and everything. But
I mean, it's an odd type of criticism, in inverted commas, to say that we've got a problem with the fact that each episode is so short. It's really praise, clothed in criticism. We're saying it's so good, we want more.
Right? Basically. Collar, what's the clip that you've put there?
For sorry. No, I was just showing, like, so I pulled up Apple TV, like I was trying to show over here. So my runtime is 57:30 for the episode. So it just says right there, 57 minutes.
That's with credits.
That's from start to finish. So like I said, 57 minutes, but like that's not. I'm breaking down time frames. Like for me, it's 57 minutes, but in all actuality, when you break down the runtime, it's more like 40 minutes. So
One other thing I would say on that is that there was one bit. This is a tiny bit of criticism. There was one bit in this episode where they're over the channel, and then they start getting flack, and they're sort of suddenly over Munster. And I felt like I don't know if this is the case, but I felt like there was more. They'd shot more, and the editor was just sort of forced to cut to Munster now, and it's like, oh no, there could have been at minutes and minutes and minutes worth of more tension and action, and we're now just over Munster, and that was one bit that did stick out to me as they've just leapt ahead suddenly, it seemed to me anyway. But again, that's a veiled praise, really. I'm saying I want more, give me more. It's so good. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, for anybody sorry, mate. Just for anybody who doesn't know where Munster is, I'll just put it up on screen and then you carry on, sir.
Yeah, I mean, the Munster raid, I mean, obviously was pretty disastrous, but completely agree with HistoryBro on that one. It did kind of feel like there was a little bit of a time leap there. I think we probably could have gone a little bit, along the lines of the sort of dual narrative. I know it would have been perhaps a little bit clunky to have taken us out of that and then put us straight back into it, and then suddenly we're there. But I mean, each episode does have a dual narrative anyway. So, but yeah, I just really would have liked to have seen an awful lot more up there. The journey there. I mean, the journeys were pretty horrendous. I know there's only so far that you can actually go with, wow, isn't it cold up here, and look out for the enemy, and what's our estimated time of reaching the IP, etc. etc. So
just going to go to a couple of comments in the chat here. Great Dominion saying, I have a feeling this will be the last miniseries of this type by these producers, this team.
Yeah,
I think you're right, and I have to say that's a shame because they could have done a lot more. Analog Bath. I wonder if we get a director's cut of this miniseries when it releases as a purchasable product. I would be shocked if they did it, but man, do I want it now. If we were in the time of the early 2000s, like 2002, 2003, they definitely would release, first of all, the series. Then they would release an extended edition of the series to make more sales, so that you'd get extended episodes on the second box set that you've already purchased the first one.
Yeah.
The problem is that physical media now is a collector's market, and the sales are not what they were. So the incentive for them to produce that stuff isn't the same. They might do it because it is a big market. World War II, Band of Brothers and Pacific box sets probably have two of the highest sales of DVDs and Blu-rays of all time. But
Band of Brothers absolutely does.
Johnny Cash, thank you for sticking around, mate. I appreciate you coming to the channel, and we'll be doing this every week on each episode.
Thanks, Johnny.
One thing to build on what Inside Man said there, there's only so much you can do if it's cold up here, and it's scary. But I mean, you look at the film Memphis Belle, for example. I feel like in the air is when there's no action going on, is a sort of time when you can have a more dialogue and you can do characterization whilst they're on the way to the mission.
Absolutely right.
I would love more of that. I just would. I want more.
Yeah. The intensity of it, like they're preparing, like going into this, like doom. They're going into doom. Like I'd love to see more of that. The characterization, more dialogue. I agree with you totally. Like there was another one. I don't know if you saw the Amazing Stories that he did an episode on there with Spielberg.
I did. Yeah, I saw that.
The B-17.
Yeah.
It was a great episode. That was another good one where you saw a lot of the characters and the development of them going through war. I'd love to see more of that. This series is kind of all over the place for me. I just feel like it's kind of it's and I guess it's meant to be chaotic, but I mean, I'm having a hard time with this series a little bit. So
yeah.
Have you seen episode 5, Gooch?
Yeah, this is episode. I watched it earlier in the way. I think this one where there was only one plane that came back. And then
spoiler alert for anyone watching, but
sorry. Yeah. Sorry.
We've been trying to avoid saying that the whole stream.
Sorry.
You got your Gooch.
Sorry. Possibly only one.
Yeah.
Scratch that.
Yeah. But there is the scene where someone pisses into a condom and says bombs away. That was quite entertaining.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure how much more of that we need, but
well, Lance, one thing I wanted to ask Bo, because I'm sure he would know that. I also wonder with in terms of authenticity, we're hitting a point where it's 2024. If we hit like say 2030, at some point, like we start running out of like how much more World War II memorabilia can we make authentic? Because obviously, say it's 2035 years from now, how many more B-17 fighters can you find outside of the museum? So in theory, is it going to start getting harder to make these movies without massive CGI? Because it's you can't find like World War II tanks, just like you can't just grab one and throw it onto a set. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, already it's an issue. I believe there's very, very few actual B-17s left. I think there's like one or something, or one or two. Very, very few.
There's
hardly any in the whole world that fly already.
There's one in Europe, and I think there's one in the States.
I think we have one here in Canada, actually.
Because one of them
Winnipeg here.
crashed recently, didn't it? Or in the last few
Yes,
years,
it
it was
did.
at an air show, and there was a
Yeah, it was
terrible
last
accident.
year actually. Yeah, dreadful accident. Yeah,
Everyone
I think
died on
and
that.
all,
Terrible,
all the
terrible
people on
incident.
board were killed, weren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's already that's already a thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And with aircraft, also they're very delicate things. Aeroplanes, they're very, very delicate things, and that you constantly have to. For example, as a Brit, you may not know this, but most Britons have a love affair with the Supermarine Spitfire.
Really?
Yeah.
Right. And
I know that.
there's still a few flying, and it's absolutely remarkable that there's any that still function. It's absolutely incredible. They're treated with kid gloves. The point is that in not very many years' time there will be no World War II era aeroplanes that are actually serviceable anymore. Tanks are something a bit different, but yeah. But when it comes to making TV and films and things, I think the future will be, just models and CGI.
I mean, it's something I joke because I have a 16-year-old, which, Lance and you guys did, but like I laugh about, my son will see a flashback from a current TV show. Hey, like say Ted, for example, with the Ted prequel, they show like in the 80s or 90s box TV, but we're like, how many more like maybe Hollywood vaults, but like who can find a box TV in 2024? And it's going to be harder to find people want to show like, oh, hey, I made a cassette mixtape. But 5 years from now, it's like, what the hell's cassette mixtape? And
I've still got a couple of hundred VHS tapes, and I haven't owned a VHS player for like 15 years. I don't know where I would buy one anymore.
I still have a VHS. I still have a VHS player.
Nice, yeah.
Getting back to the B-17s, we do have one here in Winnipeg. It flies during the air show. We have a Boeing plant here, and we have a huge air plant here.
Yeah.
There is a B-17 here, Flying Fortress. Yeah.
Hey, Lance, I didn't want to. I was sharing the screens. I did pull up Netflix. Just want to show you the season 4 Netflix, the length of the episodes. It's amazing how season 4 how long those episodes were. Jesus.
On the subject of kind of stuff disappearing, I've mentioned this, and I'll show you this clip real quick. So. This is a second unit footage from Paratrooper. This is not graded. Lots of special effects are missing, all of that stuff. But in this scene, see, we got 2 Stugs, and right after that scene was shot, the reason that we shot this scene early, because we didn't have all the funding in place at the time, was because an American collector was about to buy both of those Stugs and ship them off to the United States. So we had almost no time. And the time we were just putting together a finance package for this. This was a European Band of Brothers, by the way. That's what this show is. So it's called Paratrooper, and it's about European airborne forces in World War II. Not just British, but Polish, Canadian, and German as well. There's a German episode. So it was like, okay, we've raised, I think we raised £10,000 or something. And these tanks that we had lined up for the show were going. And I was like, well, if we've got to cut together some kind of promo reel, why don't we shoot that scene with the 2 tanks before they get purchased? Most of the tanks from Saving Private Ryan are also in America, apart from one of the Tiger replicas, which is at Duxford. It was nuts. Dree Kings, I don't know if you were on this shoot.
We actually had all of the Private Ryan stuff left over still at Hatfield Studios when we got there. First started shooting Band of Brothers. Literally everything from Private Ryan was still there. Everything,
right?
Every single vehicle. And they were still bringing in vehicles as well. I mean, Alan Tompkins and his team were kind of refitting some other vehicles, turning them into World War II vehicles, half tracks, etc. That was quite interesting, to see some of their stuff that they'd sort of put together on various vehicle chassis. Everything from Private Ryan was there.
We had these painted up especially for this scene, so that they were the right markings and the right numbers for this unit that was near the bridge on D-Day, and you can see that oak leaf on the back of that tank. That's the right marking for that unit on that particular,
Yeah.
I guess the tanks could have been a bit more dirty, but surprisingly enough, a lot of the stuff that was sitting around in Normandy waiting for the invasion to happen was cleaned on a fairly regular basis. So, but
it's interesting to know. Just to say, I'm sure you guys know about this already, but just say for perhaps people in the audience that might not know, is a lot of the heavier German tanks, some of the big cats, the King Tigers and things. There was never that many of them made in the first place. And
no,
then
that's right. No, you're right.
And then a lot of them were lost in combat. And then a lot of them, any ones that did survive, they become extremely rare and valuable. They become collector pieces. So museums or private collectors cherish them. And so you're left actually with very few. I mean, for example, there was a super heavy German tank, the Mouse. They only made 2 of them, I think, or maybe 3. And one of them was blown up in the war. And so, in other words, they're just ridiculously rare.
They've got one of them at Bovington, haven't they? They've got a Mouse at Bovington, I think, because I think I saw it.
It would be one of 2, I believe.
489 Tiger 2s were made in World War II.
So that's not very many, is it?
It's not, no.
Considering you would have thought nearly all of those were lost on the Eastern Front.
Yeah, or during Battle of the Bulge, quite a few of them were taken out then, and a lot of them broke down as well, or got stuck on roads or bridges that wouldn't support them, because they were so bloody heavy. So that, I mean, a lot of the tanks for Band of Brothers and for Saving Private Ryan were built by Stephen Lammonby, who's a friend of mine, and he did a check over some of the vehicles we were getting, and he owns a couple of different things. Judy, that's just part of a second unit footage for Paratrooper. We were never able to raise all of the funds to complete the pilot, and if you know anyone who's sitting around with £500,000, which is how much I need to complete the pilot, please have them get in touch with me, because I'd love to go and film it. And nearly all of the filming was going to be done in France. That's one of the few sequences we shot in the UK, and we've got all the Paratrooper drop footage all ready as well. So there you go.
Just out of interest, Lance, can we get super geeky on those leaves on the back of that thing? Was that one of the SS Panzer divisions? What is?
No. That's it basically would have been an assault gun company. It was attached to
Wehrmacht.
You had 2 units that had either tanks or assault guns near Pegasus Bridge, because that's what that is. That's the last attempt by the Germans to take it during the day. The last time they did the push on it, which was stopped by this guy who charged out in the street and attacked them out in the open with a Bren gun. Often truth is stranger than fiction. Very, very well documented.
Did he get a VC for that?
He was killed not during the charge, but he was killed later that day by a sniper. He's one of the main characters in the show, played by Alex Reese in that sequence. I forget the name. Michael somebody, a really young lad, 21 or something. And
you've got to be young to do something like that.
Yeah.
It's very rare guys in their 30s or 40s do things like that, to be honest.
Yeah, unfortunately, my gas and electric bill this year is probably going to be about £495,000. So, so I've got to pay that off.
Give or take.
But I mean, it's amazing that we could shoot the pilot for Paratrooper, which is a 2-hour feature film, for that money. But we can just because of all the contacts I've got with all the kit and and just the numbers of people that I know that own 4K cameras, and so just there's people just waiting to do it, but we just couldn't raise the money, and we tried crowdfunding for it twice. That's how we got the money to shoot that tank sequence. I'm getting a little bit off topic here, but they did have a Piat, mate. That's part of the scene. It's in the scene actually. They brought a Piat up and the bomb wouldn't launch because the Piat was bent. The Piat got bent on landing when the guy jumped with it, so it didn't work. But that's all in the scene as well. There is a guy with a Piat in the scene, played by Alex. Is it Alex Woodall? Something like that. hey, but if anyone wins the lottery that's watching the stream, please get in touch. Blue, what's this thing you've put up on?
Oh no, like I was just saying, I was just showing like the length of season 4 with Stranger Things, like right here, like 101 minutes, 87 minutes, 142 minutes for an episode of a show. So it's just a premise, like we were saying.
Was that episodes of Stranger Things? Did you say?
That was season 4, and like we were
Right.
just saying, like how Netflix just did that, where like everyone talked about, if one episode of Masters of the Air was 142 minutes, I'd be all for that. Why not?
Yeah.
Why are they restricting themselves to like 30 and essentially 35 40-minute episodes? You're on a streaming service. There's no time restraints. You guys, you can make a 140-minute episode because you're on a streaming service. What's going on? I don't get it. So
Yeah, I mean, I suppose in reflection, you look at the budget for this. You times that by 9, and then you consider that you've only really got sort of 42 minutes worth of usable stuff or used footage. That's you start to divide those dollars up by the minute. It's a big amount of dollars per minute.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how frustrating it's been to see some of the shit that's got made when I've had such a massive struggle just trying to. And originally we were going to shoot that pilot, by the way, for 250 grand. I've only doubled that now because of the rise of cost of living and, of course, all the costs of filmmaking and hotels and everything else have all gone up. And we went everywhere to try and get that money, including Netflix and Amazon, just to get the money for the pilot. I've got a massive pitch deck for the show right behind me, and I couldn't even get a meeting with any of them. And I've got a whole load of actors attached to it, all well-known cast,
And yet they made She-Hulk.
Well,
yes,
I was waiting for somebody to say that line, and thank you for reading my mind. I
love that you mentioned She-Hulk because like Masters of the Air, like I won as drinker, but he left. But everybody here in the panel, some of the CGI sometimes in this show can be questionable, but at the end of the day, it still is a TV show. This isn't a $200 million Hollywood movie budget, but again, for what it is, it looks fantastic. Where everyone's like like Bo would say, look at She-Hulk, like, hey, we spent on 8 episodes for She-Hulk $300 million, and you're like,
yeah.
Well, I don't
Somewhere
know.
along
Like
the line, there's definitely some Hollywood accounting going on there.
Well,
God, yeah.
You watch
how many producers there are on that show, but I bet you they all had a very nice paycheck. Sorry, Gooch, go on.
No, I was just gonna say, you look at the creator. That was 80 million, and you look at the visual effects in that, it was just incredible, like absolutely amazing. Like it was, visually stunning, and like I think there's no excuse. I think you gotta really look at how you want to go about this. I think what's happening in Hollywood and a lot of these producers and everything, they're just getting lazy, and it's just a money grab. That's my thoughts on it, but I mean, I could be totally wrong, but
I mean, I'm not sure if Lance could ever ask somebody in the Hollywood atmosphere during interviews, but like it always feels like for some reason TV shows can never look as good as a film, and I'm not sure what the reasoning, because it's like you hear $100 million on a TV show versus $100 million on a movie. It feels like $100 million on a movie in a big cinema. It's some reason it looks better than on a TV show. I don't understand the whole logistics on that. Why it is for?
Well, there's a lot of reasons. I mean, we've got to remember that we're in the digital age now, so everything looks different anyway. Although, I mean, even I can go on my edit suite and opt for a Godfather grain and have it just whacked on whatever I've shot, and it will kind of look, it will have that look. But it's not as simple as that. I think also it all depend on the cameras and
I was
the
going to say, is the
format.
actual movie cameras? Those
I mean,
massive cameras that cost millions of dollars.
Well,
you can't beat that, right?
I don't know about. I mean, it's all about the lenses. If you ask any DOP about the look of a film, he'll always tell you it's about the glass that's used on the camera. And even in the digital era, I still think that that's true. And I've worked with about 8 different DOPs now, and that's probably the only one thing that they all agree on. Is it's all about the lenses.
I've got to be honest. I do think that it's a lot to do with the minds behind it, the minds that are actually that are manning the cameras, the minds that are behind a particular series. Now, I think there was a point where television was getting more cinematic, and cinema was getting more televisual. There was that kind of weird kind of overlap at one point. But there are some minds that only think televisually. There are people within this business that only think in terms of television, that are working on television. They don't think, what we're going to do is we're actually going to make this like it's for cinema. And that really does get shown on screen, because let's face it, you can have somebody with a fairly okay camera, a director that's got a pretty good cinematic mind, have a very, very low budget, and he can still make something really, really fucking decent that will look very, very cinematic. I think it's to do with the minds behind it. In terms of the equipment, I don't think the equipment is really that, really that important now. I mean, it's important in as much as everybody wants Ultra HD. This is what everyone's looking for. Everyone's looking for 4K. It's almost like this has been foisted upon us. People are being forced, almost cajoled into having these ultra high quality, ultra high resolution pictures. But at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter, as long as you have the people behind the camera who are genuinely looking at something in terms of it being a piece of cinematic art.
Do you know what? Do you know what I'd like to see? I'd like to see a film made using genuine sort of 1960s, like very early color cameras, if it's possible to do that. Actual film, to get that look, and not a digitally recreated version of it, but the actual thing. Like the way, like early Technicolor, like the film Cleopatra. I don't know why springs to mind. Something like that, where you could try and recreate that digitally, but to actually do it, I'd like to see a film done like that again.
I mean, it's just the problem with Technicolor,
give me the money and I'll do it.
The problem with Technicolor is that you actually shoot 3 separate pieces of film at the same time. So you shoot a red, a blue, and a green. They're all shot. It's very, very weirdly done, but they're all shot in black and white, but they're shot in red, blue, and green, and then those 3 pieces of film are combined. So that's a really, really expensive process. I mean, ultra expensive. If you're gonna, I mean, it's funny you mentioned Cleopatra. I mean, the film that virtually bankrupts 20th Century Fox. Just a tiny little piece of trivia about Cleopatra. They were in London shooting. They were in at Pinewood shooting for over a year before they up sticks and moved to Cinecittà after Elizabeth Taylor nearly died of some lung infection. But whilst they were there, believe it or not, after a year's worth of filming, they had 7 minutes of usable footage for shooting a year.
That's crazy.
7 minutes. Wow. Absolutely mental.
You wouldn't get away with it. People's heads would roll and they'd just ditch the whole project, wouldn't they, nowadays?
They very nearly did. They I mean, and famously, and obviously, I'd say most people probably know this. They kind of they moved over to Cinecittà, where it just become, it was, the dollars were flowing like water. It was, I think it was 25 times its original budget, or something ridiculous like that.
Italian pizzas for all those extras don't come.
Sorry about going a tangent.
There was one point Geach made, which I wanted. Sorry, Inside.
No, please.
Well, there's just one thing Geach said I thought was very interesting about laziness.
Yeah.
Okay, this show, Master of the Air, doesn't seem. I don't get any feeling that anyone's being lazy.
No.
Wow, hold on.
The chimneys,
Episode 4, Your Honour.
Yeah.
with the exception of the chimneys.
No, with the room.
No, but
I mean, you know, come
details
on.
matter.
but there is this thing. What was that Lord of the Rings TV thing which bombed terribly?
The rings of power.
Yeah, right.
That's-
So
that was
there,
on the
let's
video.
see, there was
season 2's coming.
it
I
seemed
know, I
that
can't wait.
things were quite lazy there, despite the budget
Mm.
being gigantic. For example, I saw someone make a little video about armor. It was about armor. I can't remember who it was, Shad or someone. It might have been Drinker. I can't remember who it was. And they just showed that in that Rings of Power or whatever it was called, the armor was like in quite a few shots, like quite obviously like plastic or like styrofoam or some crap. And even in like an advert for coffee, they had like armor which was just 100 times better, more authentic, just for a coffee advert, where obviously the budget was tiny compared to Rings of Power. So you can only really chalk that down to incompetence or laziness or something.
Well, definitely
They didn't have. Well, right, both, yeah, quite possibly.
No,
So
I think it's
certainly a thing.
I think it's time management also, because when it comes to a lot of these shows, it seems like and I hate to use the term lazy, but that's what I just first thing came to mind, because if you're going to manage your time properly, everything's got to be done in a certain timeline, so everything works out nice and gels perfectly. So I mean, if they're focusing on whatever scenes and they're staying on those scenes, and then they're limited time space for like CG or whatever, then that's on them. And then it looks rushed, it looks lazy, it looks poorly managed, directed. It just doesn't work. So I'm sorry if I used the word lazy, but that's what comes to mind for that kind of stuff.
You make a good point, but that's on them. Like that's project management. Okay, that's like, you can't blame anyone else for that. You know how much time you're going to have. You know your budget. It's your job to make it not look crap. So,
but I think when they kind of set out right at the very beginning and said, you know, anything to do with Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, we're going to discard. Anything to do with Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, we're going to discard. We're really going to kind of start this from scratch. And then it was, you know, we're going to kind of, you know, we're going to do the thing that we think that Tolkien would have done.
Well, that's
really, you know, I mean, absolutely,
they didn't.
I mean, garbage. I even thought it's funny that Gooch actually does mention laziness, and I actually think it's probably an appropriate word to use. And that was the music as well. I mean, parts of that music were literally ripped directly from A Bridge Too Far. There were chunks of that were taken from A Bridge Too Far.
What are you talking about on episode 5 of Masters? You're talking about?
No. In Rings of Power.
Oh, in Rings of Power, my God.
Yeah,
the music in that show is just forgettable. I mean, it's like,
it was.
You know,
you know,
let me just read out this super chat from Dan Candy, who's had a unit named after him in my gaming streams in my American Civil War, the Dan Candy Rifle Brigade. Hey, Lance, any chimney faux pas this week? No, but I have a feeling that's not going to be the last super chat I get about my chimney minutia. I feel there might be a few of those to come. So, oh man, I mean, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole about Rings of Power, but that show was pants, and I'm a massive Lord of the Rings fan. I'm not a book Nazi that it's all got to be the same as the book, but it just needs to feel good. And it just and I met somebody who's just finished doing season 2. Lovely guy, brilliant actor, Sam Hazeldine.
Nice.
Poor guy. He was his father came to see a play of mine, and I invited his father to come and see. And then when his father actually turned up, I shit myself and couldn't bring myself to talk to him in the bar. And next thing I knew, he'd gone. You know, that's James Hazeldine, who used to play Bayleaf in London's Burning Bow, who you'd remember from that. And he was sitting in the restaurant next to me on the table, and I've spoken to him before on social media, but we've never met. And I just suddenly went, Sam, and it's like, it's Lance. You know, we talked about your dad, because I wrote to him and I told him the whole story, because his dad passed away quite young, and I thought he'd like to hear the story. We had a lovely big hug, and I was like, haven't you just finished aren't you about to shoot Rings of Power season 2? And he said, no, I'm all done with it. It's all shot. It's all in the can. And I said, how was it? And he said, yeah, it was the most fun I've had in ages. And I said, okay, did it all feel like it was pulling in the same direction? And he said, yeah, no, it's good, because that's not what I heard about season 1 from people who were on season 1. That it's a lot more disorganized and lots of rewrites happening, and while they were shooting and stuff. But apparently season 2,
even the promotions, like they promoted it as a prequel to The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, and then they backtracked and said no, it's not. So like that's the problem with a lot of these shows that are being put out there. Like even with Madam Web, they promoted this as as part of like it was supposed to be part of the MCU.
Let's keep this to World War II if we can.
Well, I know, but like getting to Masters of the Air,
I don't want to talk about that movie. Drinker's review of that was all I needed to see.
No kidding.
Oh, but it'll be fun to stream everybody here, just us breaking down budgets and effects, because that would be a very good topic off of because there's a whole discussion with that.
On that subject, because Inside Man, you weren't here when we started the stream, and I was actually saying this shot was one of my favorite shots of this episode, because we hadn't had this whole kind of launch sequence and everything. And this is an accurate depiction of Thorpe Abbott, wasn't it? The 100th were based at.
Yeah, Thorpe Abbott,
and funnily enough, when I was wandering around Suffolk, trying to find Framlingham Castle with my friend, I think September it was, we came across the remains of Thorpe Abbott, and the control tower is still there.
That control tower is actually that was actually a rebuild. They did that. They restored that quite a few years back.
Yeah, I mean, I could tell they hadn't filmed at that actual location. Bits of the runway is still there. Most of it's got like cow sheds and stuff built on it now. But they have got the control tower still there. One of the billet huts is still there, and there's like a little hall, and there's a memorial plaque, and there's a list of all the planes that went down, and a big long list of names of casualties and stuff. It's huge. So it's quite interesting seeing that. This does feel like quite an accurate recreation of the airfield from the pictures that I've seen. So I'm guessing this entire shot is a recreation. Is that correct?
I would anticipate that's completely fabricated. That's completely CG.
And I know,
I mean, these days it's actually very. I'm sorry, I beg your pardon.
Well, you told us they had 4, not necessarily working, but 4 fully sized mock-ups of B-17s, right?
Yeah, they have. Yeah. I mean, but in terms of creating CG that's photorealistic, I mean, we know how easy it is now. You know, I mean, it's pretty easy just for anybody to recreate an image that's photorealistic on Photoshop just at home. You know, it's relatively easy with the kind of tools that they've got here, and the kind of computing power that they have here, but the size of the image is the most important factor. I mean, I would say that's 100% CG.
Yeah,
I would say there's very little of that's real.
The actual mock-ups that they had, could they move? Could they taxi? Did they have rotating propellers or anything like that?
I believe this. Yeah. I believe that they could, because as you know, I mean, I wasn't there at the location.
No, I know you weren't on set. You were more in post.
No, it was over at the Apple TV studios for interiors.
Right.
But those are, I believe that they were working propellers, and they could be towed. I believe. I'll have to ask someone. I think I'm right.
I've got a shot of because they built the airbase at it was near the village of Shipdham, if that sounds correct. I've got some pictures here, and then there's pictures of in this article. I can drop the link in the chat for anyone who wants to see. There's a couple of the mock-ups there, full size, and then you've got, this is the camp that you told us they did a big mock-up of a prison camp. So I guess we've got that.
That was Hemel Hempstead. That was Bovingdon.
Do you think that episode will start with somebody knocking the side of a little train with their trowel twice, and they'll be carried along a little tunnel on wheels? Probably not. Like the Chicken Run sort of homage.
Yeah,
Hemel Hempstead.
Hemel Hempstead. There are also, parts of Hemel Hempstead, the streets of Hemel Hempstead were actually used as well. That were, they did some redressing of existing buildings within Hemel Hempstead, but Bovingdon, former Bovingdon Air Base, now Bovingdon Studios, soon to be no more, I believe. I understand, from what I understand, it's actually going to be a housing estate on there. So
that's correct.
which
sadly,
is a fucking shame. Yeah,
these are all the different parts of the beast, the little sort of different sections where they would film the different gunners firing and stuff. And I mean, at one point there is a fairly continual shot of somebody walking through the aircraft to sort of duck through one part and another, and that did feel really, I really felt like I was in the aircraft more so than in Memphis Belle. I just, it felt a bit more cramped. It felt a bit more restrictive. And we've got these are actual photos on Insta, I think, of real missions of the 8th that were taken at the time. So it's interesting to kind of look at these, and when you compare, I mean, I remember, like, I've seen comments, quite a few of them online, of people saying that the plane trails are unrealistic in the show. They're not an accurate depiction of plane trails, and I'm like, that's nonsense.
they are absolutely realistic.
Yeah, there's loads.
Absolutely realistic.
There's loads of footage. I'm sure Bo's watched it all from his cockpit booth. There's loads of footage of bombing raids with all the big plane trails. I've seen them myself.
It's funny, actually. Where, like, my thing is history. Like nearly all my content is either straight up history stuff or occasionally things like this, talking about the dramatization of history things. It's surprising. You get people out there that really, 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 really know their stuff, and they'll pull you up on something, and it's fair enough. They've banged you to rights. You've got something factually wrong. Okay. Those people are actually quite rare. What's much less rare is people that don't know anything about what they're talking about, but they insist that you're wrong about something. That's quite common. That's quite common. Someone will call you up for being factually wrong about something, and they're out of their mind. They couldn't be more wrong, and yet they'll argue it till the end of days, and they're absolutely convinced they know better. Like, I've had a few conversations with a great guy, Tim Davies. He used to be a fast jet pilot in the RAF for years and years and years, and people will correct him on stuff. He would. I mean, he knows the cockpit of a Hawk inside out, or a Tornado inside out. Okay, it's what he's done. He taught people how to fly fast jets, and there'll be someone in the comments saying, "This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He got this wrong." Some people are mad. They're really mad. Why you would think those trails aren't realistic? Who would say that? What planet are you on? But there you go. That's the internet for you, I suppose. That's the internet for you.
I think what it takes is just one person to make a comment, and then you'll have somebody who has that credulity, and they'll read through that, and that's it. They've read something once, and that's all they know. That's kind of burned into their
Someone told them something once down the pub, and that's it. Now that's historical fact that can never be questioned, and anyone who says opposite is just wrong. And it's like,
but it's,
okay, all right.
But isn't it funny? Isn't it funny how somehow opinion, and a completely uninformed opinion can now supersede and override fact? Strange.
Scary.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, it happens all the time. Going back to the set, I know I showed this on a previous episode, but we might have different people watching. This is the majority of the kind of the base set with the different Nissen huts and so on. And then you would have a brief section where you'd have a couple of planes parked up, but you're probably not even noticing half the CGI in this show in the shots on the ground, I would argue. A lot of the times when people are driving the trucks out to the planes and things, I bet half the stuff that you're seeing or not seeing in the background is either blocking something out or is a CGI replica of a field that you don't realize is, blocking out half the crap around this set. So there's probably a lot more CG in the show that people realize.
Definitely.
So I know, Bo, we talked about this character played by Tommy Jessup, who's in Line of Duty. And I did do some more digging in that. And apparently the character is real. Or based on somebody who was real. And then I also had some interesting comments or dialogue back and forth. And of course, even back then, before we packed people away off into dubious mental institutions run by Jimmy Savile types that should not have been in charge of those places. I think there was a tendency in British society that if somebody was a little bit abnormal, we probably would kind of keep them out of sight or not really give them their due. It's extremely unlikely that a character depicted by an actor like that was going to turn up in a film made in either the late 40s, 50s, or 60s. Just wasn't going to happen. So maybe, I think it's a fair inclusion as it's based on fact, from what I can tell.
Fair enough.
There's a few questions for the panel in the chat. So let's before we wrap up, let's get to a few of those. Not just is that Dr. Evil on your panel? No, it's HistoryBro. But there's a couple of questions here. One from Gaza London, mate. I hope you're an Arsenal fan. Is the flak accurately recreated in Master of the Air? I think so. I mean, HistoryBro, what do you accurate depiction?
Yeah, I mean, I believe so. It's one of those things that if you never experienced it, you can't really say for sure, I think. But from all accounts, apparently that's what it was, a puff of black smoke like that.
Yeah,
but I think we do actually have enough kind of reference footage, I suppose, from inside of some of these aircraft. So tons and tons of reference material. So
absolutely.
It looks very real to me.
Yeah, one of the things I would say is, of course, it's an actual explosion. You think, as long as the you might think, if you don't know about it, you might think, well, as long as you're that puff of black smoke, as long as that doesn't hit you or hit the plane, you're all right. But no, of course, it throws out shrapnel a long way, a much, much bigger radius than just that black dot.
Yeah.
So, you could have a piece of flak explode a fair way from the plane, and actually you're still in trouble, right?
The shrapnel comes in through the fuselage.
Because often they were 88mm guns, not always, of course, but often.
Yes,
that was the classic thing. The German 88's the classic thing. That's quite big. That's quite a big shell. That's no joke, right? You could have a bit of.
If you took a direct hit from an 88, you were going down.
Blow apart a direct hit from an 88 would blow apart a B-17. Remember, aeroplanes that it's just a fuselage. It's just a tin can. The wings are like they're not sturdy things. It's remarkable how much damage they could take and still keep going. Absolutely remarkable.
Yeah. Well, indeed. One person mentioned about the deployment of flak, which I'm Dre Kings, which I'm assuming is referring to the shot. I think it's in either episode 1 or 2 where we see the flak in a line. Just to defend that shot, they were generally in box shaped, except in Holland, where often they were wedged in lines in between the waterways and the flood dikes. And the ground was very, very soft. So they often weren't able to deploy them in the usual fashion in Holland. Sometimes they would be in a line in Holland. A comment here from Blibbity Blop. I do love these names. It's the shockwave that would literally tear the aircraft apart.
That's a good point, actually. That's a very good point, yeah. Yeah, that alone could rip open a fuselage or something. Yeah, yeah.
I mean, considering these are only made of aluminium skins or aluminum skins,
Yeah.
Depending on whether you're British or
come on, old boy, it's aluminium. Come
American.
Question from
aluminium.
Judy Hops. So this is an interesting one, which I can offer a little comment on. On this question for the experts, this show went through a lot of rewrites and difficulty getting networks to show interest. It went through a huge journey. Do you think without COVID, Masters, they could see Masters of the Air lacked a solid focus? I don't know, because the show that we're seeing now, for all we know, the episodes might have been completely different that was pitched back then. I mean, when you pitch a show to a network, you have to have a pitch deck, which of course everybody has them electronically, and I do have this electronically, but this is the pitch deck for Paratrooper. It's massive, and it outlines there's a treatment for every episode in here, and your predicted cast, or in the case of this pitch back, it was actually all the cast that we had attached, because we attached loads of them. And then you've got to have all these different visuals and to give them the kind of mood board for what every episode's going to be like. And so, I mean, I'm sure even with the name Spielberg and Hanks, they would have had to have had all this stuff. And the
only real difference between this being pre or post COVID was COVID testing, and that's it. There's nothing else. There was enough time. There was ample time to get everything absolutely right, and it was finely tuned. But of course, you don't really know until something's shot, rushes are viewed, there's a rough cut, it's looked at, and whomever is in charge, i.e., Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg, are looking at that and saying, that doesn't work. As I said last week, I mean, we shot an entire episode of Band of Brothers, episode 1, twice. So we had 2 episodes that we shot. There was a fraction of what you see in the current episode, or the actual episode, comes from the original shoot. Only a fraction of that.
That was effectively a reshoot, right? Effectively, it was. And what was I mean, just to give our audience a bit of insight, what was the thinking behind that, in terms of, obviously people watched it and went, this isn't going to work for episode 1. What was wrong with it? I'm curious to know.
It was quite sort of convoluted, to be honest with you. It kind of didn't really get anywhere particularly fast. All of the ingredients were there, but there were key things that really needed to be there that weren't there. I'll give you an example. When they're doing the training, there's a lot that was made of the I don't know whether you've ever heard of the hog's innard problem. I mean, HistoryBro might know that if he's read the Band of Brothers book. It's called the hog's innard problem, and it was to do with the assault course and everything, and going under these wires and crawling through pigs' guts and all of that. And there was a huge scene made of that. Also, the jumps. So you were seeing bits and pieces over character development. The only characters that were really being developed, or the only character that was really being developed, was Dick Winters. There was a hell of a lot of that episode that was only done in letters home or diary form. So it would be Dick Winters, doing a voiceover from his diary, very reminiscent of what we're seeing with the Harry Crosby voiceovers and everything with this. And it didn't work. It genuinely didn't work. That was primarily it. I'd have to get the episode digitized and then over to you. And you can
I've got to say, Inside Man, I've got to say, I would love to see that.
Yeah, me too, mate.
I would love to see.
There are tons. There's actually a ton of stuff that's in it that's very, very crude CG. looks very kind of early PlayStation.
Yeah.
So it's just but it looks.
Temporary
You
shots.
get exactly what it is. It's unfinished effect
Yeah.
shots.
Are there any
It is
unreleased
very good.
David Schwimmer scenes?
Yes, there are. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, there are.
I mean, I thought David Schwimmer it's his finest hour. Band of Brothers.
I don't say that to take the piss. I thought Schwimmer in that first episode was superb. Really, it's probably the best thing he's been in. Yeah.
There was one scene that we shot, one particular scene that we shot. I mean, I don't know how many of you have actually read the Band of Brothers, Stephen Ambrose book.
Yeah, I've got it.
You might recall that there's a whole part of one of the chapters to do with people coming back from their leave slightly late, back to Toccoa slightly late, and they're drummed out. They're on parade and they're drummed out. We shot an entire drumming out sequence where everyone's on parade and their wings are ripped off, and their trousers are unbloused. They have to take off their jump boots, and they're unceremoniously sort of ejected from the parade ground and subsequently out of the 101st Airborne. That was quite an interesting scene, and I remember that day being incredibly hot. We shot that in May of 2000, and it was absolutely sweltering. We shot that on a Saturday. I still remember that being a Saturday. Incredibly hot May in Saturday. Saturday and May. Sorry, but that was missing. Some jump stuff was missing. Loads of stuff that was at North Weald that was missing. Some stuff of I'll tell you what is missing. The veterans. There's some really interesting stuff at the beginning of this particular episode. Bearing in mind that it's a temp episode, and the veterans at the beginning, that's completely different as well.
Right.
And the temp track is actually quite good. So they've temp tracked it with a few bits and pieces of
Sorry,
stock
just to
music
clarify,
as well.
this is the pilot episode, or this is episode 10, because you just said the 10th episode just then.
Oh no, no. Did I say the 10th episode?
Yeah, but I think that's not what you meant. But yeah, it's all right.
Yeah.
Watch it back later.
Sorry. First, episode 1. It's the first episode.
So for anyone who's wondering, did they have any flying B-17s for the show? The answer is no. This is how they made them fly, with this ginormous crane. And then with the wonders of CGI, the various elements were removed. So this is Sally B, which is the last airworthy one in Europe, and it did fly over the set at Abingdon, and I think they did some shots with it. So there probably are a couple of shots in the show, but in the main, the answer is no. And that's the extension of the that's the what's called the hard stand set, which is basically the area where the planes are parked and leads to the runway.
It's incredible, really. As I say, just to reiterate, it's incredible that there are any that are still airworthy. They must be constantly, pretty much constantly, gone over and over to make sure they're still airworthy for 70, 80 years now. So the fact that any of them are still alive in terms of being airworthy is remarkable. It'll be a labor of love for a number of people, for a couple of generations worth of people. Remarkable. Hats off to them.
I think Analog Bath must work in post-production, because low poly CGI or pre-visuals are basically temporary shots that are put on edit so people can work out what's going to go there ultimately. So
no, they weren't previous. It wasn't previous on the.
So these were kind of they were rough cuts, sort of rough versions, but they were going to be touched up. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, they were the original. It was kind of like the base coat, let's just say. It was like it's almost like the primer coat that was ready to be painted on. So that's probably the best way of putting it. So everything was there and it was ready to be finished, but it was just unfinished.
These are the red tails. I don't know how many episodes we got left. 4, right? 4 episodes.
4. Yeah.
Yeah,
man,
it's 9 total.
That doesn't seem like enough. Yeah. So I mean, and they had 2 working flying red tail aircraft, from what I can tell.
What are they? P-52s or something?
P-51 Mustangs.
P-51, sorry.
Yeah, and a Russian Mark Spitfire. There's also stuff for a B-17 crash. So you have all these various components scattered over this field for a crash sequence. I'm guessing we haven't seen this sequence yet because that hasn't happened in the movie. And then if you look in the background of that shot, you can see the bombed out German village, which is a set that's coming up in another episode. There's the prisoner of war camp set, which is very impressive. I'm assuming all of these have been taken down inside Man, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Now, which is a shame. Why can't they leave these things up for us to go and play with them? Or to go and grab a camera, quickly make a quick World War II movie when no one's looking.
Although there is, I just want to. I'm not going to tell you exactly what set it is, but I'll tell you guys after which set is still standing from something.
Okay. And this is
because otherwise.
This is one of the better scenes of episode 4. I mean, we did say this last week. This sequence was very powerful with the dead body of the kid being brought out of the the bombed house and period bicycles, and basically here they've constructed a bomb house in what actually is a street, in way there. So very well done.
It's funny, lads. Well, not funny, funny, interesting. There still used to be World War II era bomb sites, even in the 70s and 80s, right? So, I mean, I don't want to be too rude, but you're a touch older than I am. You might even remember them yourself. There was a place out near
Old Man.
Yeah,
I'll defer to Gooch on this question because he's like about 77.
Whoa.
There's the film Full Metal Jacket. And Full Metal Jacket at the end, the whole last sequence where they're fighting in that. That's a place in East London.
Yeah,
wow.
It's cleaned up now.
Yeah,
Beckton, is it? Did you say Beckton?
Yeah.
Now, I believe, if it's not a false memory, I believe I even saw that as a child, and it was still just a bombed out bombscape type thing. It's all cleared up now, I believe.
It was.
It's been abandoned for years. But it's funny you say that, actually.
But that's a World War II bomb, right? It's incredible, right?
Yeah. That was used for quite a few films, not just Full Metal Jacket. And I went down there after Full Metal Jacket. Me and a couple of mates, we broke in, and the palm trees were still there.
Really?
I'll tell
cool.
I have a Full Metal Jacket story, but I'll tell you that after as well.
Is this enough?
Well, just one last
time to end the stream.
One last point on that. Like my parents' generation, or even my sort of older cousins and things who were children during sort of the 60s and 70s, they say there was whole bits of London that were still bomb sites from World War II. Incredible, really incredible.
It's funny because I was only talking to my son about this, one of my sons, yesterday. In fact, we were talking about the war and I said, it's funny, in the early 70s, I still remember that there were huge areas that were just undeveloped because they were still bomb sites, and this is in the sort of early 70s. I mean, I was, at that particular time I was in the East End of London, which obviously got hit, considerably.
Wasn't that long ago that there was a UXB found? I can't remember if it was King's Cross or wherever they were digging some new railway.
Yeah,
and there was one found, and they had to remember it was on the news. They had to remote detonate it because it was too difficult to move it, and it might go off and all of this kind of thing.
Yeah, well, it's like whenever people go mudlarking on the Thames, they're always warned. Be careful of, if you find anything that might be considered, a UXB, then for Christ's sake, get the hell away. But they're there.
We'll start wrapping it up because we've gone over the 2 hour Mark, and History Bro's got worlds to conquer, and so on. History Bro by day, but Ming the Merciless by night.
Makes
so
sense.
I am looking very Ming-like today. It's the lighting. I'm not that anemic. It's the lighting. I swear.
It would be great if you could come on one of the streams and you'd have that sort of like that red get up with the big spiky collar. And a sort of a long drooping tash. I'd pay for an expensive super chat on your channel to see that happen.
He needs a cape.
Maybe we can look at that for Christmas.
I'd rather be likened to Ming the Merciless than Nosferatu, which I have had in the past. So anything's better than Nosferatu.
Yeah, Tom Cruise does have his own B-51, Drew Gordon. You can see that in Maverick, Top Gun Maverick. He's flying Jennifer Connelly around in the plane. You can see her screaming quite excitedly in the passenger seat, and you can see all the insurers of the film holding their breath and praying something doesn't go wrong. But yeah, do please subscribe to my channel if you haven't, guys. I'm all about promoting the work of independent film, television, and other content creators. There is a ton of industry interviews on this channel. I just interviewed Ron Underwood, the director of Tremors, last week, and on that stream, Gail Ann Hurd came on, who is the producer of Terminator, Terminator 2, Aliens, The Abyss, Alien Nation, and currently the Walking Dead franchise. So some things you may have heard of. Do check that out. I've also got an interview this Wednesday, so just 4 days away, well, 3 technically, with Steve McManus, who was editor of 2000 AD, from Progue 77 to 500. So he covered what was for me the golden era of 2000 AD, when you had the first debut of Rogue Trooper, you had all the best Judge Dredd stories, the Apocalypse War, the Block War, all of that stuff, the Cursed Earth, Strontium Dog, and you had the VCs. You also had things like Fiends of the Eastern Front, which was probably the only World War II strip that they did, and I've got it right here. Look, there you go. So they brought a special one-off edition of that out, and I decided to pick that up. You can also get my episodes of Paratrooper, the show that I've been trying to make. You can get the screenplays. They're on Amazon. This is the pilot episode, and then you can also get 4 other episodes. This book contains the episode set in Arnhem, and also the episode set on the island of Crete, told from the perspective of a German paratrooper. So it's a bit like that episode of Star Trek where we tell the story from the bad guy's point of view instead, the evil empire, all the rest of it.
Sure.
So you'll get a good idea of what I want the show to be if you pick up some of them. It's going to be a lot of fun. For any World War II person to read. My scripts are very visual, so I think you'll be able to picture what I'm trying to achieve with it quite accurately. I've also got, as I mentioned earlier in the stream, got a couple of other big interviews coming up. One with actor Damien Herron, that'll be towards the end of March, probably going into April time. And then I've got a special stream on 5 days at Memorial with at least one of the cast, maybe 2, on March 31st. Plus the Nielsen ratings every Tuesday at 10 o'clock UK time, where we review all the latest film and television releases. We'll be talking about that film. Chris, what was it that you watched the other day? We're going to be talking about that this Tuesday.
Land of Bad.
One Love.
Land of Bad with Russell Crowe. Quite a good movie.
Oh,
yes, very good.
Another military sort of action film. So anyone who wants to hear more about that, we're going to be talking about that on
definitely
Tuesday night. We're going to be talking about House of Ninjas. And of course, Bo knows a lot about that because he employs an army of those for his evil base. So on that subject, History Bro, all the links and stuff for you are below, but where can people find you? What you got coming up?
Yeah, there's my own channel, History Bro. Check that out. But also I'm on the podcast of the Lotus Eaters and lotuseaters.com. 2 channels there, usually talking about history-themed things, often in conversation with Mr. Sargon of Akkad, aka Carl Benjamin, but also with all sorts of other people. And sometimes actually on the live podcasts in the afternoons. So that's it.
Fantastic. I'm just going to address this before I go to my next guest. Blippity Blop, if you want to have a full-on tech chat on the bombers involved in the campaign, we'd love to chime in. Well, on the last episode of Masters of the Air, I intend on having quite a massive panel. So drop me a message via Facebook, mate. Just put in Lance Steen Anthony Nielsen. I'm the only one. You'll find me. There's also an Outcast Creative Facebook page, and get in touch and we'll talk about that. And
super quick to say on that person, Blippity Blop. I've noticed them on Twitter, and they do seem to know their stuff. So hello, Blippity Blop. Hi there. See if we could get you on.
Excellent. All right, excellent. Well, you've already had the HistoryBro approval star, so very important. BluCollarLoser, I know you're going to be with me on Tuesday night. What else you got coming up?
Well, if you want to, or anybody on the panel, I always invite people, trying to get more people in our circle. But we're watching our Tuesday rewatch. We're watching Out of Sight with Jennifer Lopez and George Clooney. So,
that's a great film.
Yeah, and anybody here, you guys are more than welcome to come on. I always feel bad asking different people because we're all on different. We have 5 different time zones for here.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, man. Anytime I'm still awake, and that is 5 a.m. most days at the moment.
Lance joined our Groundhog Day stream. He was on for an hour, and he was hilarious. I was so glad to get Lance for a good hour. So,
and I kept repeating what I was saying, so it was felt very Groundhog Day. Yeah, I mean, my body. I've been doing streams. My body clock's actually changed, not just because of my acting coaching, which is with people in America, but because of the streams I've been going on. I'm going to bed at 4 or 5 o'clock every day now.
It seems like this point, it's like there's 19 streams a week I'm trying to keep up on. So I just picked Tuesday night because it's the one time no one I know my circle is streaming. So it's the one time I think we're kind of free. But
you're on after me.
With Drinker U, we got Gooch here. We got a Stepenzo. We have Cannoli. There's so many people. I'm trying to keep track of everybody streaming.
Really appreciate the 43 people that are stuck with us and are still watching right to the end. Thank you very much for the love. So Gooch Muncher, what you got coming up?
Busy week. Monday I got a few streams I'm on, and I'll be doing some streams throughout the week. But on my channel, Diabolical Souls Presents, go check it out. Please subscribe. Just got over 800. I'm at 844 subs, which I appreciate every one of you. But Tuesday I have Chuck Dixon, the writer and co-creator of Bane. He wrote Batman and Nightfall series. He's a very prominent writer in the DC world, so he'll be on. We'll be talking comics. We'll be talking about his new book, Horseman, which he's working with Eric July with.
Right.
So he'll be on. Wednesday, I'll have Jason Bascom on, also known as Unhinged, and talking about his new book. And then Thursday nights, which is becoming a big, kind of a big hit. We're doing Arcane Episode 5 review of Arcane, and it's been a lot of fun. We have Stupenzo, we have Amateur Analyst, we got Andrew, we have Little Platoon, we have Hostman, a whackload of guests that come on, and we dissect each episode. And so this week it's episode 5, and it's going to be a lot of more. Zach's, thank you, Zach's another one. He came on last week. He's been sick, so he was supposed to be on episode 3. That was his favorite episode, but Zach's has been on, and it's been a great time. So anyone that wants to watch that, we do that at 10 o'clock Eastern, and that's about it.
Okay, yeah, and you get some, like me, you're doing a lot of guests, a lot of comic creators and stuff, which is great.
A lot of interviews and reviews. It's and I don't just limit it to comic book. I got a lot of really big guests coming in. I'm booked into almost May now with guests, so I'm really excited for a lot of these guests to come on and talk about the content creators. There's comic book creators, there's artists, writers, actors, what you name it, they're coming on. So it's going to be a great time. So
can you get Stephen Abootman from the Canadian Bureau on?
I don't want anyone with the Canadian Bureau. I don't want anyone involved with the Canadian government on my show.
For those people watching, that's a South Park joke, which we'll come back to another time. Okay, Gooch, great to have you on. Inside Man, your YouTube channel is going to be launching soon. Metropolis Now. People
Oh,
can
wow.
follow you
Yeah,
on
it's
Twitter.
it's very, very soon.
I know you're going to be doing a special episode on World War II chimneys and chimney designs to kick off. Obviously, I'll be on that with you as an expert in that area.
You can follow me on Twitter.
Yeah, I've got the
Now.
link for that. It's already in the blurb down below.
And thank you very much.
Okay. Okay. Well, look, thanks very much.
That's that.
Blippy Block knows what I'm talking about. I'm not your guy, buddy. Yeah. So, look, thanks to everybody in the chat. Thanks to my mods for keeping things in line. But it seems to be a very friendly crowd. I know people have got a differing opinion on this show, and some people don't like the show, but some people like it. So some people like different things about it, but hate other things. But it's nice that we can have a civilized discussion about it. And we don't. One thing I'll just say, and I'll say this always on my channel, we don't always have to agree. And you know, Drinker and I have very, very similar tastes, but we don't agree on everything. You know, and just like me and Gooch agree on practically nothing. So I like being in a world where we have people with different tastes and different opinions, and it's okay to have a different opinion from someone else. But it's also nice when one can have a civil discussion about things. World War II aerial combat is not my area of expertise. I am a bit of a historian, but that is not my and we've learned a bit from the chat tonight. So keep those tidbits coming, because it's nice to be educated on the areas of this show of which I know very little. So it just remains for me to say thanks to my guests for coming on, HistoryBro, BluCollarLoser, Gooch, the Inside Man, of course, the Critical Drinker, who was with us for the first hour, and also regular collaborators that I've seen in the chat, Zax, Jammer Lama, Melvin, many others, Northern Bastard. Great to see you in and supporting us. We'll be back at 9 o'clock next week to discuss episode 6. And I'll be back on Tuesday with my usual show, the Nielsen ratings, to talk about everything else that we've watched. Until then, don't forget to call the people that you care about, tell them you love them, and we'll see you all again real soon.
Bye-bye.